Hey guys, tonight we slip quietly along a moonlit shoreline where the sea exhales and the trees lean in like a crowd at a bedtime story. You pad across cool sand, step into the dark fringe of the forest, and there it is. A ring of wood chips glowing pale as shells, and adze ticking like a metronome, and a canoe slowly waking inside a great tree. You'll smell sap and salt together, a recipe for adventure that, let's be honest, you probably won't survive if you try this for real without snacks, sunscreen, and, several thousand years of inherited knowledge. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is for you, so we can imagine this shoreline stretching around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive as the first canoe takes shape, not yet a voyager, more like a very quiet intern with splinters. The log lies on forked cradles, its bark half peeled. A master carver taps a basalt adze, its edge dark and convincing, and each gentle strike makes the wood sigh open. Your job for now is to carry water, keep the coals breathing, and avoid sitting on the sharp end. That last task sounds simple, and yet somehow, you make it an adventure. The builders choose the tree with ceremony and calculation. They listen to wind moving through leaves, looking for a steady tone, wood that sings straight. They watch the trunks twist, the way branches spiral. You're told a canoe inherits the tree's memory of wind. A mainstream historical fact tucked under the hush of this night. The ancestors of Polynesian voyagers, often linked to the Lapita cultural horizon, were making seaworthy outrigger and double-hulled canoes thousands of years ago, pushing eastward into remote Oceania with astonishing speed and skill. That speed, the elders say, came from patience. Dozens of small, careful choices, from the first chip of bark to the last lash of sennet. The canoe is hollowed by fire and restraint. Coals are piled in a neat strip. You fan them just enough to toast the heartwood, not enough to turn the project into an unscheduled bonfire. Your eyebrows thank you. When the char is cool, the adze returns, shaving away blackened curls that smell like smoked vanilla and rain. The hull lightens, the sides thin. A cord-strung bow to stern becomes a whispering ruler. The master plucks it and judges fairness by the note it makes, the way a luthier listens to a violin's ribs. You nod like you understand, because nodding is a timeless seafaring skill. Lashings grow in a neat geometry. Coconut husk fibers are rolled on thighs until they sing, a soft hiss like a distant shore, and braided into sennet. Each stitch passes through pre-drilled holes, and here comes a quirky tidbit. Shark skin, with its sandpapery denticles, sometimes smooths the wood, while sticky breadfruit sap makes a passable caulk. You try a swipe with the shark skin and immediately decide sharks have been unfairly marketed as moisturizers. The canoe's ribs and stringers settle into place, not nailed, but sewn. This boat is a flexible cathedral, allowed to breathe with the swell rather than fight it. The logic is simple and brilliant. When waves flex the hull, lashings stretch and recover. Rigid joints crack, but woven ones forgive. Balance, the master says, tapping the keel line with the adze handle. Not just balance in the hull, but in the voyage to come. Weight of food and water, crew and cargo, even the stories you carry. A crab claw sail waits in the dark, its two booms tucked like folded wings. The cloth is pandanus, scraped, split, and plated with care that could shame a luxury handbag. You run your fingers along the edge and feel the slight wax from a finishing rub. Coconut oil, ash, and a secret ingredient you're told is experience. Which is to say, you don't get the recipe tonight. The night deepens. Bioluminescent flecks fizzle in the nearby lagoon like the stars are practicing their reflections. Someone points out Hokupa'a, the North Star, steady near the horizon point you'll later learn to call a house on the star compass. You aren't there yet. Tonight is about wood and will. Still, the sky hums over your shoulder, and you file away the idea that the canoe is a bridge between two maps. One carved from a tree, one inked in light. Historians still argue whether the earliest pushes into the far Pacific were a cascade of deliberate exploration or a more gradual, opportunistic slipping from one island to the next, guided by seasonal winds and curiosity. Even among navigators, stories vary. Some speak of prophetic dreams. Others remember lists of swells and birds, angles and durations, as precise as any pilot's checklist. Your take, as you rub warmth into your chilly fingers, is that it's both. People who planned, like accountants, and improvised like poets. You help shape the bow, and the canoe's face emerges. Not fierce exactly, but alert, like a hunter listening for footsteps under leaves. A decorative figure begins to appear, eyes stylized, lines repeating in mirrored curves. These aren't just ornaments. They're mnemonics, you're told, cues for names, genealogies, sailing directions. The hull becomes a memory palace you can launch. You trace one spiral and find it points with quiet stubbornness toward a familiar gap in the hills where trades pour in. Another curve coils back on itself like a snoring cat. Joke 1. The workshop cat, incidentally, is an unpaid consultant who specializes in sitting on the one tool you need. Food arrives in humble splendor. Roasted breadfruit, taro with coconut cream, and a fish that tastes as if it has been bribed. A gourd of water is passed hand to hand. You take a sip and realize your future may contain a lot of gourd. Someone teases the apprentice who tied a lashing backward earlier. He accepts his fate with stoic grace and a new nickname that translates roughly as Loop. You are deeply grateful not to be Loop. At the stern, a steering paddle as tall as you leans like a guardian. You try to lift it and succeed in moving approximately 3 atoms. Joke 2. The steersman grins and shows you the proper grip, then gestures to the horizon where swells roll in from a distant storm, long-legged and polite. Remember those? He says. They will matter when the stars hide. You imagine a future night, quiet, but for the hiss of the bow and the slide of the paddle, when you read those swells like a braille book under your feet. A small pile of stones sits near the bow, offerings from different shores. A red pebble, a pale coral fragment, a dark volcanic oval smooth as a worry bead. They're pocket altars, a reminder that even a brand new canoe belongs to a chain of places and hands. You add a shell you found earlier, and try not to make it a whole thing. The master notices, nods once, and you feel like you have been granted a very minor building permit. Joke 3. Sometime before dawn, the hull is turned. Everyone gathers, palms under wood, breath held, and the canoe rolls with a slow, dignified twist that makes your shoulders sing. You see the belly for the first time. Clean lines, fair and lean. It already looks like speed tamed into kindness. There will be more work, fitting the outrigger boom and float for stability, smoothing the underbody, oiling, blessing. But the canoe is no longer an idea. It's a promise in the shape of a question. Where will you go? A last ember pops. The master stamps it with a heel. The lagoon is a mirror. You crouch, palms to the cool hull, and you can feel the tree's old wind, now turned sideways into a road. This is how wide oceans begin, with ears measuring tone in a trunk, with fibers singing into rope, with smoke-darkened wood and laughter that takes the sharp edges off risk. You're not on the water yet, but you're already at sea, because the voyage starts the moment a community decides to go. You wake before the lagoon remembers how to sparkle, and training begins the way most good training does. Someone hands you a job that looks easy and turns out to be awareness disguised as chores. You fetch the steering paddle, the one that outweighs your confidence, and carry it along the beach with 2 hands and a prayer. The master has you stand where the sand meets the hush of the wash and just look. Not at the obvious things. You soften your gaze until the horizon becomes a single charcoal line drawn by a patient artist. See how it breathes? He says. At first you don't, so you pretend. Then you actually notice it. The line swells a little where long, orderly waves arrive from a distant storm, and to the south, the texture is scuffed by a smaller cross swell, like someone rumpled a blanket. That is lesson 1. Your eyes trade drama for pattern. They teach your ears next. You kneel, close your eyes, and let sound find you. Hollow slap in the canoe hull, hiss of the shore break, a far reef throwing its slow applause into the morning. When the air is still, surf can carry miles. It's one of those useful, boring truths that saves lives. A mainstream historical fact slips in here quietly. Pacific navigators, lacking magnetic compasses or sextants, relied on a disciplined reading of environmental cues, stars, swells, clouds, birds, and the sound and smell of land, to cross astonishing distances. The point isn't to become a superhero, it's to become a tuning fork. You're a little flat at first. They put you belly down on the outrigger boom, arms over the float, your cheek to polished wood. You feel ridiculous and surprisingly happy, like a sleepy seal that signed up for a physics class. With your eyes closed, the steersman nudges the canoe a handspan this way, a finger width that way, and you begin to feel the cross-swell tug, an invisible hand patting the hull from the side. That, he whispers, is the road under the road. The elders have names for swells, a vocabulary of invisible streets that intersect and part. You won't memorize them tonight, but you start a list in your bones. Now, your skin learns wind. A downy feather, quirky tidbit alert, plucked from the stash used to fletch small arrows for fishing, sits on your palm as you stand in the canoe. You turn slowly until the feather barely quivers. In the dark, this trick becomes a compass rose made of goosebumps. You had thought wind was either on or off. It turns out wind wears outfits, carries gossip, and changes moods. When it smells of warmed reef and crushed leaves, people start smiling without looking up. When it tastes metallic and cold, someone mutters about squalls. You try to taste wind and mostly taste your own optimism. Joke one, but you're getting there. The master won't let you count waves yet. Instead, he shows you how to notice their timing the way you notice breathing when someone falls asleep next to you. Without numbers, with kindness. You stand knee-deep, feel the push and pull, and let your knees become hinges. After 10 minutes, your legs know more than your head. Keep that, he says. Later, when clouds hide the stars, you'll steer by what your knees remember. You make a mental note to appreciate your knees. They have never been invited to anything this important before. Memory gets dressed in stories. You sit by the canoe and repeat a chant so simple a child could carry it, and so layered a navigator could hide an archipelago inside. The chant pins wind names to a string of landmarks, attaches bird habits to moon phases, and braids wave directions to months of the year. Historians still argue whether such chants were standardized across regions or tailored to particular voyaging guilds, jealously guarded within families like heirloom tools. Either way, the rhythm sticks. Your fingers toy with a length of senet, the same fiber you rolled until it sang last night, and you tie and untie a practice knot each time a bird appears overhead. Tern, noddy, shearwater, frigate bird. You whisper their names like friendly neighbors. Frigate birds, you learn, rarely land on open water. If you see one beating purposefully at dusk, it is usually commuting home to roost. You file that away with the same tenderness you gave the little stone offerings by the bow. Someone sends you to collect a gourd of water. The same gourd from last night's dinner rests cool against your hip. You are instructed to sit with it by the shoreline and watch the seam where dark ocean meets paler lagoon. A trick of color, turquoise over sand, indigo over depth, becomes your cue for reefs and passes. If the sun were higher, you'd see clouds anchored over unseen coral heads, bright patches of reflected light that reveal the underwater gardens without a map. For now, you just listen. The master asks, without turning, what you hear to the north. You answer, the reef, steady and far. And to the east, the smaller surf of a pocket beach. And above, you almost say sky, but then you remember and answer, silence. He nods. Silence is a sound you must also read. You try not to look too pleased with yourself in case the gods of hubris send a loud coconut to fall nearby. Joke 2. Practice shifts to the canoe. You stand midships, one hand on the lashings, and close your eyes. The steersman trims the crab claw sail just a finger's breadth, The hull whispers into motion, and the outrigger float begins its quiet punctuation in the chop. You learn to keep your body soft, tense, and you amplify noise. Relaxed, and you become a sensor. You notice how, when the canoe yaws to starboard, the boom hum deepens, a wood note just above sleep. That sound means you're feeding your course to the swell, he says. Take a breath, ease a palm. Let the canoe pick the path and you guard it. You're not guiding so much as not interfering. An underrated life skill. The eyes get a stranger exercise, watching nothing until something appears. Mid-morning, you practice horizon grazing, letting your gaze skim for the tiniest anomalies. A smudge that might be a squall, a darker smear that might be the shadow of a cloud sitting over an island far beyond sight. You learn that certain cloud types, towering, piled like breadfruit, short anvils with bright bases, act as umbrellas over warm land, while elsewhere thin, high veils mark dry zones. Clouds, it turns out, are the island's introverts. They don't say much, but they point faithfully. Later, when we sail, you'll spot an island hours before its sand touches your toes because its cloud has been waving the whole time. You practice pointing and then closing your eyes to hold the bearing in your body. When you open them, you check if your finger stayed true. The first time your finger drifted so far, you accidentally pointed at the workshop cat, who took it as a compliment. Joke 3. By afternoon, smell enters the lesson plan. You're told that in certain conditions you can catch a bouquet from land long before you see it. Flowers, leaf mold, the salty sweet perfume of reef flats warmed by sun. Also, less poetically, guano from seabird colonies. Pungent but reassuring, like an overachieving cheese. You tilt your head and inhale like a sommelier grating the wind. There isn't much tonight, but the possibility implants itself in your sense repertoire. Another tool in the box next to sharkskin sandpaper and breadfruit sap glue. Remember that shark skin? You run a patch over a stubborn ridge in the gunnel and laugh softly when your fingers buzz. The same attentiveness you use for smoothing wood, you now use for smoothing your mind. Questions arrive with the tide. How do you keep a course when clouds steal every star? How do you know your speed without a knot log? The master answers by not answering. He has you count heartbeats to the rhythm of the bow wave, then guess the time since you left the point where the river meets the sea. He tosses a pinch of shredded coconut husk into the wake, and you watch how it lingers to port when the crosswind pushes the hull. Leeway you can feel and now see. Historians still argue whether navigators standardize such embodied measures, heartbeat, chant length, paddle strokes, into widely shared protocols, or whether each crew evolved its own feel that visitors could never quite duplicate. Either way, the old ones say, consistency matters more than precision. Repeat the same method, and your errors average out like waves smoothing the sand. Evening drapes the lagoon. Stars begin to pepper the sky, but no one teaches you constellations yet. That's for another night, in another lesson. For now, your task is humble and infinite. Notice the world until the world notices you back. You stroke the steering paddle once, and feel, deep in the wood, that patient tree wind you met last night. You adjust your stance, soften your knees, and the canoe answers with a contented murmur, like a cat purring in the language of swells. When darkness thickens, you can still feel the road beneath the road, and you know, for the first time, that you could keep a straight line through cloud, not by defiance, but by listening. You breathe. The horizon breathes with you. Night pats your shoulders with cool hands, and the beach becomes a quiet classroom. Someone smooths a circle in the sand with a palm frond, then looks at you with the sort of kindness teachers reserve for the student who brought enthusiasm instead of geometry. You try to draw the second circle, and it comes out like a confused breadfruit. Joke 1. No one minds. The circle is only a doorway. You step inside, barefoot, and the master marks the horizon with evenly spaced notches. Houses of the star compass. 32 points, he says, though he doesn't bother with numbers. He points with his chin and names them in a rhythm you already want to hum. Each mark is a doorway where a star rises or sets, a fixed address on a moving night. You are told to face east because beginnings like to arrive from there. The sky lifts itself from deep indigo to a soft, salted charcoal, and the first bright arrivals take their places. Hokupa'a hangs low in the north, a quiet nail pinning the roof of the sky. To the south, 4 lanterns lean, cradling a dark kite. The Southern Cross, a little off to one side like a guest who prefers the wall. You soften your knees, as you learned yesterday, and let the star wheel turn. The master's finger skates from one house to the next. When this star rises here, you steer to keep it just so. When it reaches that house, you slide your course to follow its sibling. You don't memorize words so much as you memorize angles in your body, the way a dancer learns a sequence without a map. A mainstream historical fact, folded gently into the sand. Navigators across Polynesia, Micronesia, and the broader Pacific tracked the rising and setting azimuths of specific stars, Arcturus, Aldebaran, Sirius, the Pleiades among them, to hold courses over open ocean without instruments. The knowledge wasn't abstract. It lived in chance, in sand circles, in the posture of a steersman at midnight. Some systems, like those preserved by Carolinian wayfinders, describe a star compass with houses named for winds and regions, a wheel of memory you can walk with bare feet. You practice walking. The master places you at a mark he calls the house, where a certain red star, Aldebaran, peaks up. He taps your shoulder when it clears the horizon's soft blur. You raise your arm and stack your fingers to measure its height. A fingertip, 2, 3. Your hand becomes a ruler no one can drop overboard. Keep it there, he whispers, just so above the lashings. If clouds erase it, keep the angle alive in your elbows. You hold, and the star crawls along its invisible rail. Your arm hums. Somewhere behind you, the workshop cat, who has apparently expanded his consulting portfolio into nocturnal astronomy, sits on the one shell the master was using as a marker, because of course he does, joke 2. Then the wheel turns you toward zenith stars, those special beacons that pass directly overhead at particular latitudes. The master tells you that Hokulea, Arcturus, is beloved not only for its bright, honey-colored steadiness, but because it climbs close to the roof of Hawaii. Its track whispers of where you are on the wide skin of the world. Far south, the Southern Cross tilts like a slow clock. Align its long axis with the horizon, extend imaginary lines, and you find south, not a needle on a card, but a memory of gravity written in light. You let the trick settle into your bones, no urgency, like a warm drink on a cool night. The beach becomes a memory palace. The master places stones for islands along the circle. One for the chain you're leaving, one for a place you haven't seen, one for a reef that exists mostly in stories. He has you walk from house to house chanting the star names, then pause where, in your mind, the canoe meets a change of wind. The chant clips a syllable, then lengthens, then clips again, mnemonic speed bumps marking currents and swells. Here comes a quirky tidbit. Sometimes, to teach children, elders poke tiny holes in a broad leaf or a mat and hold it above a bowl of water. When starlight pricks through, the ripples make the points shimmer, and the bowl becomes a small rippling sky. You try not to gasp like a tourist. You fail gently. The idea of Etak arrives like a tide and leaves like one too, hard to hold and easy to feel. You're told to imagine a reference island, real or remembered, gliding under your canoe as you sail. The canoe is steady, the world moves. You count stages as if you're crossing stepping stones that only you can see. With each star you keep, the ghost island slides under a new house of the compass. Historians still argue whether the Etak framework spread widely across Polynesia or remained more specifically elaborated in Micronesian traditions, and whether the versions taught in modern times represent a single ancient schema or a family of related methods. The master shrugs at debates and taps your chest. What matters, he says, is that your mind knows where to rest. You take a turn being the chorus. While the steersman points, you sing the star path of a hypothetical voyage. This star rises here. Steer tight. That one sets there. Ease 2 fingers south. When the Pleiades lift, count 3 swells and taste the wind for leaf sweet. The song is not beautiful, but it remembers well. Your voice hushes the circle, and you catch yourself smiling at the absurd miracle that you can hold a road in your lungs. You suggest naming one star, frequent snack break. The master sighs in a tone that translates as innovative, but no. Joke 3. Clouds slip in, thin veils that test your patience. The master nods to the swell, reminding you of yesterday's lesson, the road under the road. He shows you how to take a bearing off a star not just by its compass house, but by its height above some part of the canoe. 2 finger joints above the boom, half a palm above the lashings, a fingertip north of the mast top. You mark these with your body, notches in your internal canoe. When the star hides, your hands still know. On long passages, he says, a navigator can keep such bearings for hours, eyes soft, attention spread like oil on water. A breath of practicality slips in with the night air. When you rise before dawn at sea, the sky gifts you certain stars that become temporary friends. By mid-dawn, they sink into daylight, and you trade them for others on the opposite horizon. Your compass is never empty. It just rotates its cast. The master has you rehearse the handoff. Follow the rising line of Sirius until it's too high, then slide to the setting of Altair. Keep the outrigger riding the swell as your silent metronome. You can feel your brain braiding if-then ladders. If this star goes here, then that one comes there. If clouds wall off the east, then trust the cross swell and a bird commuting home. You ask, because curiosity is a shape your mouth takes when the night is kind, if these house names and sequences are the same on other islands. The master's smile tilts. Historians still argue whether the star compass terms now commonly taught reflect a unified ancestral system or a patchwork codified during recent revivals. What seems certain is that names travel like people. Some change, some persist, some marry into new families. He squeezes your shoulder. Call them what your elders call them, he says. What matters is that your body can find them in sleep. At last the test comes, as gentle as a lullaby. You push the canoe off, let the outrigger kiss the lagoon, and stand with one hand on the mast. The sail whispers. You set your course on a low, bright friend, Venus if she's up or another rising guide, and you keep it at the right height above the lashings, as if balancing a bowl of starlight on the rim. The lagoon smooths itself. Your knees remember the swell's cross-grain. Your ears, the reef's applause. Your nose pretends it can smell breadfruit orchards beyond the dark line. 10 breaths. 20. 100 heartbeats matched to the hiss at the bow. The star lifts, you trade it for a new one, and the canoe does not wobble, because you do not wobble. Somewhere within the circle you drew in the sand, a better circle draws itself in you. The cat, on shore, chooses not to be impressed. The moon is more generous. Dawn stretches itself like a cat on a warm sill, and the canoe slides out to the line where lagoon light turns to ocean ink. Your knees remember their job, soft hinges reading the road under the road, and your feather compass in the mind quivers toward the trades. Today your teacher points you away from the glittering distractions of the star wheel and down into the quiet grammar of clouds, swells, and birds, as if the sea wrote footnotes for those nights when the sky forgets to show up. First, clouds. You squint along the horizon and practice the art of not being fooled. A lone cumulus puff rises, then fattens, then holds its base unnaturally flat and bright, almost backlit from beneath. That, the master murmurs, is a hat on a head you can't see. Warm air over an island lifts, moisture condenses, and an island cloud hovers like a polite parasol, sometimes anchored for hours. A mainstream historical fact floats right there in the sky. Navigators across Oceania used these persistent cloud formations, taller, brighter bottomed, sometimes smeared with greenish reflections, to infer land tens of miles before sighting shore. You test it. The cloud keeps its posture as the canoe advances, The base flashes pale where sunlight ricochets off lagoon sands you cannot yet see. It's like watching a friend wave from behind a curtain. But clouds lie, and you learn the tells. Rain cells drift over empty ocean like absent-minded giants. Their shadows move faster than your hunches, and their bases look bruised, not bright. Lenticular stacks over peaks are real, but rare. Sprawling anvils promise only a scolding. Your task is to hold a suspicion gently, cross-check it with something slower. So you drop your gaze to the swells. The main swell is the heartbeat, long, regular, coming from a storm that lost its temper last week and now sends you tidy parcels of energy, the way a reformed pirate sends handwritten apologies. A second swell angles in, shyer, from somewhere else. You close your eyes and hold the boom. The canoe's hum changes in the most boring, beautiful way. A soft, uneven emphasis, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, like a drummer practicing in another room. The master has you turn 10 degrees and hold. After a minute, the pattern shifts again. What your bones begin to feel is refraction, the swell bending around the shoulder of land, then meeting itself on the lee side, where complicated standing patterns can stack and cancel. On some days, those patterns, called dial-up by Marshallese navigators, make roads of low chop pointing toward islands like invisible causeways. You're not in the marshalls, but the physics hums everywhere. You lean in, remembering how shark skin sanded away last night's roughness. The sea is doing the same to your attention now. To be safe, you test the picture with another cue. Sky color above the suspected land spot deepens from ordinary blue to a faint greenish tinge, as if someone spilled lagoon paint into the air. You've been told to expect it near mid-morning when sunlight bounces off shallow reefs and up into cloud undersides. You don't trust it alone. It can be a trick, but you don't ignore it either. Navigation, you're discovering, is an orchestra. Never let the piccolo solo. Birds clock in for day shift, and everything becomes simpler and messier at once. You spot a wedge-tailed shearwater skimming like a paper airplane gone professional. Then a sleek frigate bird arrowing high with that elegant, lazy confidence of a creature that never seems to hurry, yet always arrives. The master's voice stays soft. Frigate birds roost on land, he says. At dusk they commute. Dusk? At dawn, they radiate. Noddies flap with an earnestness that makes you want to cheer. Boobies beat steadily toward feeding grounds. Species matter. Boobies don't roost at sea. If one passes you low and damp near evening, you can draw a line from its belly to land. Frigate birds steal fish mid-air and disdain getting their feathers wet. If you see them circling late, some rock has to be below, granting them a bed. Here comes a quirky tidbit, tucked in like a charm under a lashing. Some voyagers in certain regions were said to carry a tame frigate bird or booby in a woven cage and release it on hazy days. If it circled and returned, no land within its preferred range. If it arrowed one way and kept going, you followed its bold line with a little more hope and a little less lunch. Whether you ever try that, the master says, depends on place and tradition, and how well you can convince a bird to sign a very short-term contract. Your job for an hour is simply to watch traffic. Birds leaving low reefs go one way. Birds leaving tall, forested islands take another corridor. Adults fly purposeful lines. Juveniles wobble like interns on their first coffee. Joke 1. You kneel and draw faint arrows on the deck with the tip of your finger, then wipe them away as patterns update. In the distance, a frigate bird is not going anywhere in particular. It's arguing with the wind about fashion. And you do not chase it. You save your attention for the commuters whose wings write straight sentences across the morning. Then the master shows you how to listen to birds when clouds hide them. You watch a line of ripples where dozens of small wings slap water just off a reef edge. That staccato is a fish boil. Predatory birds will be near. Larger currents of life radiate out from such kitchens. You glance back to your hopeful island cloud and see new indicators tumbling into place. The cloud's base brightens a shade. The secondary swell leans with a faint asymmetry. A squad of noddies takes a route that crosses your bow and then nudges to starboard. The picture sharpens the way your eyes sharpen in a dim room. Historians still argue whether such multi-cue methods were formally codified into shared curricula across the whole Polynesian world, or whether the specific blends, bird roots tallied with cloud morphologies braided with swell dialects, were hyper-local, handed from grandparent to grandchild in accents no outsider could fully parse. You love the idea that both are true, a grammar shared, an accent honed. Either way, the sea insists on redundancy. 1 clue points, 3 agree. The master asks for a speed estimate without instruments. You listen to the bow hiss, count breaths to the slap of the float, and hum the chant you learned, the one that ties Itak stages to bodily rhythm. You're moving like a lazy jogger in a very serious cloud. You can hold this all day, you think, though your snack bag disagrees. Joke 2. The suspected island lies, say, 40 miles on. At this pace, the cloud should thicken, and the bird highway should grow busier by late afternoon. You mark the bearing not with a compass, but with your own body. Keep that cloud's bright edge 2 finger widths above the forward lashings, let the main swell kiss the outrigger at a regular grandmotherly cadence, and don't let the frigate bird's sarcasm get to you. Under the hull, the sea offers one more whisper. An almost musical rise and fall you only notice when you stop trying to notice anything. The master says that on some nights, especially near islands, navigators speak of seeing or sensing faint, lightning-like streaks under the surface. Tilapa. Quick, directional flashes that seem to point along underwater features toward land. This is another quirky tidbit you roll in your palm like a bright seed. Historians still argue whether tilapa arises from bioluminescent organisms disturbed by interacting currents, from human visual processing at the edge of darkness, or from something more electrical in the sea itself. You don't chase it tonight. You simply promise yourself to keep your eyes soft if the water ever starts whispering in light. By midday, your hopeful picture has budged from maybe to probable. The island cloud holds station. A second, smaller cloud buds off to one side, as if a lagoon outlier or reef flat is adding its perfume to the air. The swell's refraction feels steadier, the canoe's hum evens into a contented drone, and the bird lanes thicken enough that even the workshop cat, if he were here, would be tempted to swat at the sky. Joke 3. You sip from the gourd, taste warm river caught the night before, and offer a few drops to the sea because you're trying to be classy about this whole reading the world thing. You finish the lesson with a small, testable vow. Keep the bearing through 1 more hour, and if the cloud's base brightens further while bird lines tighten toward a common vanishing point, you'll trust the canoe to aim for that unseen reef pass. If the base dulls, and the birds wander, and the swell loses its gentle bias, you'll cool your hopes and slide back to a star path when evening offers you its reliable alphabet. Either way, you'll make dinner without drama, because drama is for land. The canoe slides on. The wind holds its outfit for morning, a friendly salt laundry smell, and your knees hum their private lullaby. You don't need to say it out loud to feel it. You're learning a fluent, patient language where commas are waves and periods are birds landing at dusk. And somewhere ahead, behind that bright undersided cloud, a beach warms under noon, waiting like a slow exhale. You take your place beside the steersman where the canoe narrows and the ocean's voice grows articulate, and the wayfinder slides in next to you like a shadow with excellent posture. You don't get a title, you get silence, and the responsibility that arrives with it, like a cloak woven of attention. The lashings creak softly. The sail plucks its one-string harp. The wayfinder rests 2 fingers on the boom and looks nowhere in particular, which is your first lesson in leadership. Don't stare at the problem. Listen to the pattern around it. He speaks in small directions, chin points, a purse of the lips, the faintest swivel of wrist. When he wants a degree or two to windward, he doesn't shout. He sends the idea through the canoe like a rumor the hull wants to believe. You copy him, which is adorable and mostly unhelpful at first. Joke 1. He smiles without looking away from the horizon and taps the lashings until your hands relax. And then the chant begins. Not loud, not even fully voiced, just syllables massaged into breath, star names and bearings braided with swell grammar and clockless time. You lean closer. The words meet your ear as pulse, not poetry, A mainstream historical fact tucked into this quiet. Across Polynesia and Micronesia, specialist navigators carried the mental star compasses and ocean route knowledge that held societies together across distances as wide as continents. In parts of the Caroline Islands, master navigators achieved PWO status after rigorous training. Elsewhere, titles and guilds differed, but the core was the same: knowledge that lived inside a person and moved canoes between worlds. The wayfinder's hand thumps the boom lightly on PBUO, a respectful punctuation you feel in your ribs. He shows you the watch you can't read on any wrist. "Listen," he says, and you realize "listen" means measure. Count the length of the bow hiss between two deeper slaps. Count the heartbeats in a steersman's breath. Count stages of attack, each linked to a remembered island gliding beneath you on its slow conveyor. You ask how he keeps it all from tangling. He taps his temple, then the lashings, then the stars, then the small gourd of water wedged near the mast. "Many baskets," he says. "One harvest." You decide, privately, to embroider that on a pillow, if you live long enough to have pillows again. He doesn't hoard information. He stages it. He has you keep a bearing on a star, while he gently shuffles tasks around you. One crew tightens a sheet, another shifts the weight of water gourds. Someone murmurs a joke at the cat's expense, even though the cat is back on shore, probably sitting on the sailmaker's favorite needle, joke 2. Through all of it, your star keeps its height above the lashings, your knees keep their pact with the road under the road, and you understand how a wayfinder holds not only direction, but also calm. A small teaching aid appears, a palm midrib with notches cut into it, like a slim ruler made by a patient bird. He lays it along the boom to mark where your guiding star's height should sit for this part of the night. It's not an instrument, it's a placeholder for your attention while he quizzes someone else. Quirky tidbit. He keeps a little bundle of coconut ribs and shells in a net bag, a tiny traveling sand table so he can build a pocket universe on deck, stars, swells, islands, without raising his voice. You realize why, in some islands further west, navigators taught with stick charts, delicate lattices that recorded swell refraction and island influence. Those charts stayed ashore. The wayfinding lived here, behind the eyes and under the skin. At intervals, he drifts into a genealogy that sounds, at first, like a detour. But as he recites ancestors back and back, names braid into place names slide into wind names click into compass houses. A family tree, you realize, doubles as a sailing directory. The canoe murmurs approval, or maybe that's the float agreeing with the swell. Either way, it's a good system. Historians still argue whether such mnemonic webs were meticulously standardized across archipelagos or mainly domestic, guarded within certain lineages, with public songs giving only the faintest outline. The wayfinder shrugs in the pause between verses. "Some songs you sing for guests," he says. "Some songs you sing to the sea." You watch how decisions happen without drama. A line of clouds thickens over your star path, and your tutor doesn't treat it as a betrayal. He treats it like a neighbor borrowing sugar. He slides you to a setting star on the opposite side, keeps the swell cadence in your knees, checks the bird lanes with a glance you wouldn't notice if you weren't crouched right here at his elbow. He murmurs to the steersman, who answers with the paddle's feathered hiss. No orders, no theater, just a graceful pivot from plan A to plan keep going. You attempt a tiny chin point of your own. It is, frankly, more nose than chin. Joke 3. He pretends not to notice and then imitates you perfectly, once, just to make the lesson stick under a laugh. Leadership here is half arithmetic, half lullaby. He circulates among the crew like a tide, checking calluses, catching eyes, swapping one sailor's task with another's before stiffness becomes a problem. He notices who hasn't eaten and who needs the simple kindness of being handed a cup of water rather than being told to get one. You realize, not for the first time, that navigation includes people as much as stars. Keep the bearing. Keep morale. Keep hands occupied with small, solvable jobs. A canoe is a floating city-state with an almost comically transparent budget. You ask when he sleeps. He grins. On land. Then he admits that even a wayfinder trusts the crew with short spells, choosing the most consistent helmsman to hold a star's height while he lies down, eyes open, feeling the boom with one hand, measuring time by the rhythm of the bow. He tells you that what wakes him isn't noise, but the absence of the right noise, the bow hiss gone breathless, the float's punctuation irregular, the wrong kind of silence. You think of your first lesson on the beach. Silence is a sound you must also read. It is eerie, and it is comforting. You test the edges of his certainty. What if the sky closes and the swell lies? He nods to the habits you've been collecting. Bird lanes at dusk, island clouds with bright hems, the faint green in the air over reefs, even the possible quiver of tilapia when darkness is kind. No single truth, he says. Agreement. He wants 3 signs, not 1. He wants redundancy in an ocean that permits few erasers. At some point you realize he has been building you a job description. You went from fetching paddles to being entrusted with an hour's course, while he teaches someone else to hum bearings under their breath. Your promotion comes without ceremony. Your ceremony is a deeper quiet. Historians still argue whether the status of navigators was priestly and rare everywhere, or whether in some places many men and women held medium-range knowledge while only a handful specialized in deep ocean paths. You store the debate in that part of your mind where the Atak Island rests. Both possibilities feel true across a world this large. Evening presses cool hands to the sail, and the wayfinder marks the handoff from one set of stars to their cousins. He does not say, "We are safe," because safety at sea is always conditional. He does say, "You can hold this," and he is right. Your star sits the right number of finger joints above the boom. Your knees translate the swell's grammar into posture. Your breath and the bow's hiss make a metronome no one can break. You are not yet a wayfinder, but you are a person the wayfinder can lean against for a minute, which is how knowledge survives everything but neglect. When at last he eases back and lets the canoe's hum nestle around the night, he pockets his tiny bundle of shells and ribs. He doesn't need it, neither do you, not for this hour. The sky offers its handful of bright, reliable friends. The sea offers its road under the road. You offer your quiet attention and your willingness to be boringly consistent, which turns out to be the most glamorous skill on the ocean. Morning slides across the deck like brushed silk, and daily life wakes with it. Quiet voices, the thok of a bailer, the creak of lashings deciding to be patient for one more day. You're not conquering an ocean. You're maintaining a small, floating neighborhood with excellent views. The watch changes with a murmur. Someone hands you a cup made from half a coconut shell, and you drink water that tastes faintly of yesterday's river and today's hope. Your first job is humble and heroic. Bail. You kneel by the scuppers and scoop, finding a rhythm that lets your mind wander without wandering the canoe. The water's weight is oddly comforting, a reminder that the sea comes aboard and you politely return it, like neighbors exchanging sugar forever. Breakfast is the kind of feast that doesn't try to impress. You slice open a green coconut, sweet at the lips, cool as a blessing, and scoop soft meat with a sliver of shell. Breadfruit from last night's fire, wrapped in leaves against the dew, becomes mash with a splash of coconut cream. A strip of dried fish, tough and proud, softens when you chew thoughtfully. You pretend it's jerky with a PhD. Joke 1. A mainstream historical fact hides in the routine. Long-distance Polynesian voyages relied on durable foods, baked or fermented breadfruit, dried fish, taro, yams, and, when luck allowed, fresh catch from trolling lines. Fire is rare aboard. Most of the cooking happens ashore before you sail, though some canoes set small, stone-lined hearths on windward platforms when conditions behave. Historians still argue whether open-sea cooking was common practice, or a cautious exception saved for settled weather near land. But your crew leans conservative. Cold food, hot spirits. Work divides itself into the holy trinity of afloat living. Keep things dry, keep things tight, and keep people kind. You inspect lashings with the reverence of a bookbinder, running your fingers over sennit until splinters apologize and the fibers sing. Shark skin, remember your old sandpaper friend, takes a turn smoothing a snag on the boom. 2 strokes and the rope stops menacing your knuckles. A thin smear of breadfruit sap seals a seam. You hum while you patch, because humming is waterproof. Fishing lines go over like polite letters to the sea. Pearl shell lures flash and spin, clever imitations of the smaller fish that bigger fish dream about. When a bonito hits, the line shivers up your arm, and you land it with the brisk gratitude of hungry people who've learned not to gloat. Quirky tidbit time. The lure you favor is shaped like a stylized tongue, all gleam and swagger. The elders say certain lures have names and personalities, and if you compliment them out loud, they work harder. You compliment yours extravagantly. It pretends not to hear and then produces lunch. There is music in maintenance. The steersman oils the steering paddle with coconut, each wipe a lullaby for wood. A crewmate plats new sennet, thighs whispering fibers into cord. Someone checks the mast wedges. Someone else rearranges gourds to balance weight. Balance is a domestic art. If the outrigger feels heavy, you shift water to the far hull. If the float slaps too often, you ease the sheet a hand's width. If morale leans, you tell a joke, even if it is legally questionable. 2 flying fish walk into a sail. You get booed and fed simultaneously, which is a win joke too. Hygiene aboard is practical and, dare we say, elegant. Salt water is your shower. Coconut oil is your lotion and your morale. You rinse with a baler, rub down with oil to keep skin from cracking, and comb salt out of hair with a fishbone pick. If anyone has a sprig of awapuhi, shampoo ginger, you squeeze the translucent gel into your palm and work it through like a small blessing that smells faintly of citrus. Teeth meet sugarcane stalks and chew themselves cleaner. The breeze does most of the drying, the rest is solved by patience. Bathroom logistics at sea arrive with the gravity of comedy. You learn the lee side dance. A rope loop for security, a respectful angle to the wind, a woven mat held like a modesty curtain by a friend with good balance and better humor. The rule is simple. Announce, secure, proceed. Thank your assistant with a share of dried fruit. You practice with the seriousness of a pilot. Everyone pretends not to keep score. The ocean, being generous and enormous, carries away evidence and leaves you with humility and stronger thigh muscles. No one writes a song about it, and yet somehow it is part of the chant of shared survival. Sleep is a patchwork. Daytime naps bloom like small islands. Someone curls near the mast, another tucks under a sail bundle. You line up your hip bones with a seam in the platform that turns magically soft when you stop fighting it. At night, you rotate into watches, a clockless ballet. 2 people at the bow as star spotters, 2 at the stern with the wayfinder, 1 minding the sheets, 1 minding the quiet. You sleep under a mat that smells of pondiness and wind, and you learn the art of waking without complaint. The best compliment anyone gives you is to let you keep sleeping 5 more heartbeats. The second best is being handed a cup of water before you ask. Stories stitch the hours. The wayfinder murmurs genealogies that unspool like anchor lines. A younger crewmate tells a scandalous saga about 2 rival lures that fell in love. Joke 3. Someone recites the star houses until the names become a melody you hum even while bailing. Historians still argue whether certain chants we hear today are close to what was sung centuries ago, or are careful modern reconstructions meant to preserve what the colonial era nearly thinned to whispers. Your crew treats the debate with respect and keeps singing. Living knowledge prefers melody to footnotes. Repairs come when they like. A seam weeps. You work the breadfruit sap into it with a sliver of shell. A lashing phrase. You splice in fresh sennet, then make a little protective apron for the abrasion point from braided pandanus, fashion-forward and effective. Barnacles begin to fancy the hull. At a calm noon stop, you slip over the side with a mother-of-pearl scraper and evict them gently, like a patient landlord who brought extra snacks. The water is silk against your skin, and the canoe's belly glows pale in the filtered light. Your friendly whale, your longhouse. Morale has its pantry. A private store of roasted nuts comes out after a long, silent hour. A joke is told too poorly to be true, but too earnestly to be corrected. A game of Name That Swell breaks out. Everyone arguing playfully about whether the lazy cross chop is from last week's storm or from an imaginary island that keeps moving when you aren't looking. The workshop cat, sadly not aboard, is nonetheless blamed for any knot tied backward. Several sailors swear they can hear him purring in the boom. It is a comforting superstition, and you encourage it. The sun leans, the light turns honey rind. People get quieter, which doesn't mean they stop noticing. A booby passes low, belly wet. Home is that way. The cloud that looked like a hat at noon looks like a lamp now, and you aim for the lamp, keeping it 2 fingers above the lashings, as the Wayfinder taught you. The bows hiss and your breathing find each other, and the canoe's crooked little universe feels, once again, aligned. By starlight, the deck becomes a low-lit kitchen again. No flames, just hands and calm. Breadfruit turns to mash, fish turns to thin slices that soften in citrus if you have it, or in belief if you do not. Someone drips coconut cream from a curled leaf as if painting. You eat until the world narrows to warmth at the stomach and a happy ache in the shoulders. You do your last bale of the day, not because anyone told you to, but because a dry canoe sleeps better, and so do you. The night will bring the star wheel and another lesson. But daily life has done its quiet work. You are fed, watered, cleaned, teased, rested, and braided a little tighter into the boat's weave. There is nothing dramatic to report, which is exactly the point. The drama is that you crossed one more handful of miles with the boring heroics of care. Tomorrow you will do it again, which is how islands appear where they did not used to be. Dusk folds gently over the sail, and conversation thins to a hush you could balance a shell on. The Wayfinder lifts his hand, not command, more invitation, and the crew settles into the slow choreography of ritual the way you ease into a hammock, one careful sway at a time. You fetch the little bundle of stones from the bow, the pocket altars you met on the first night, and place them near the mast, each one touching the next like family. A plaited garland of pandanus goes across the bow. The leaves rattle softly, a whispering fence against whatever the sea thinks about throwing your way. You try not to be the person who tangles it in a lashing immediately. You almost succeed, joke 1. Before the voyage, you remember, there was stone and fire and human breath against the wind. On shore, at a marae, sacred courtyard open to sky, you watched elders lay offerings and speak old names, asking the road under the road to be kind. A mainstream historical fact steadies the memory. In many Polynesian societies, priests and chiefs sanctioned long voyages with ritual at heiau or marae, invoking deities such as Tangaroa, lord of sea and fish, or Oro and Tane, sealing tapu, sacred restrictions, over the crew and canoe. There might be kava too. In Samoa and Tonga and elsewhere, the Ava Kava bowl circles with a rhythm older than sails, words poured as deliberately as drink. You can still smell the peppered earthiness of the pounded root. See the polished Tanoa bowl shining like a small round lagoon. Out here, on moving water, ritual becomes portable. A smaller bowl appears, a coconut half with a tidy lip cut in. Someone needs a twist of kava in a netted leaf, the liquid deepening to a calm brown, like steeped dusk. The cup goes first to the Wayfinder, then around the canoe, clockwise like the star wheel. Each sip is small, each breath after slower. No speeches, just a murmur that sounds like gratitude even if you don't speak the language. You take yours with both hands and try to avoid baptizing your toes. You fail, a little. The sea receives a few drops with impressive dignity. Joke 2. The Wayfinder ties a narrow red feather to the mast, bright as a captured sunrise. Then a small charm of senate wound around a shark tooth near the bow. The stories say shark teeth listen, and even if they don't, they certainly look like they could file paperwork in a hurry. Someone tucks a lashed figure under the forward deck, a tiny carved ancestor who has likely seen more miles than your modern shoes. You feel watched, but kindly, the way a grandparent watches a child approach a ladder. Every crew has its tapu. During this passage, no whistling, wind takes it as advice, and no throwing shells overboard without a word to the sea first. The first fish of this day is promised back to Tangaroa, When the bonito glitters on deck, it returns to the blue with a quick blessing and a push from careful hands. You watch it vanish silver and grateful. Quirky tidbit drifting by on a pandanus leaf. On some boats, bananas are quietly discouraged. Bad luck, say fishers from Hawaii to other islands, for reasons that range from slippery peels to the fruit's habit of ripening everything into a mess. You discover this rule the moment you reach for your emergency banana, and three auntie-level voices say, "Maybe later," in perfect harmony. You put the banana back. The banana sulks. You live. Song follows rules the way vines follow a fence, obedient to the shape, playful in the details. The chant that wraps the compass houses is sung softer than last night, vowels rounded to keep the wind from tripping. When a name for a star feels too sharp, the singer softens it, and you catch the logic. Don't give the night reasons to snag. Hands move as they sing, little flicks pointing to horizon addresses you now know by knee and elbow. Historians still argue whether the words and melodies recorded in various islands are close cousins of songs sung centuries ago or careful, loving reconstructions made during 20th century revivals. The debate matters. The singing continues. You hum on the low parts and try not to climb above your assigned note like an enthusiastic rooster. The conch shell, po, calls once. A single open vowel that seems to climb the mast and step off. It isn't about volume, it's about tone. The note presses a quiet into even the swell. A hand drums the boom with fingertips, heartbeat soft, and the canoe answers with that wood note you've come to trust. The wayfinder sprinkles a pinch of dried awa root into the water and speaks to the road. No flourish, just specificity. Keep the outrigger light, keep the squalls to the left, keep the laugh in the crew's throat. You love the practicality of it. The gods are busy, so you give them a usable list. Someone circles with coconut oil, touching the mast, the lashings, a thumbprint on each crew member's forehead. You smell leaf and sun and a little smoke from a memory of shore. The oil seals more than wood. It seals attention. Strange how a small, sensible action, oil stops salt from gnawing, slides perfectly into the part of your brain that keeps fear from speaking too often. You remember the little shark skin square you used to smooth a snag yesterday. Ritual does a similar thing to nerves, sanding them to a manageable grain. Omens are read with restraint. A ribbon of dolphins off the bow? A hello from someone with sleek opinions. A sudden clean wind shift during the chant? A small adjustment to plans, not fate-throwing plates. The wayfinder will move a stone in his deck circle, his traveling sand table. One finger width and nod. You're learning that ritual doesn't erase uncertainty. It domesticates it. The road under the road becomes a road you're not walking alone. There are mishaps, because the sea has a sense of humor. The garland blows off the bow, then returns draped over the outrigger like a lazy sea snake. You lean to retrieve it and almost baptize the rest of yourself. The crew catches your belt with one hand and the garland with the other, in that order. Priorities. Laughter bubbles and then quiet returns, quick as a tern's wing beat. The only creature who appears unimpressed is the workshop cat, who is not here but is, somehow, always here. Someone swears they see his footprint in the oil on the boom. Joke 3. You think about how ritual and navigation braid. A prayer that names winds also rehearses what those winds do. A vow to keep the first fish rehearses generosity and prevents greed from doing arithmetic with your compass. A feather on the mast is an eye-level reminder that your posture should be soft, not stiff. Even the banana taboo, whether you honor it for belief or for crew harmony, rehearses the art of choosing togetherness over cleverness. You're not just aligning with the gods, you're calibrating the humans. There is also the matter of who speaks for the gods on a canoe. Historians still argue whether dedicated ritual specialists sailed as regular members on deep ocean voyages, or whether chiefs and wayfinders handled sacred duties themselves once at sea, with full ceremonies reserved for shore. You see versions of both. The wayfinder leads tonight, but the quiet auntie who plets senate all afternoon murmurs lines from a blessing you haven't heard. And the steersman, who never hurries a word, is the one who places the little ancestor figure under the deck and wipes the dust from its brow with his sleeve. Authority here is wide and made of many threads. Night answers the conch with stars. The kava has left your mouth tingling and your thoughts unwrinkled. You place one stone back in the bow bundle and keep its twin in your pocket, a weight the size of calm. The chant slides into ordinary talk. Ordinary talk slips into the sound of a bailer being set back in its place. You take your watch without ceremony and find that the star you need sits exactly where your fingers expect it to be, 2 joints above the boom, 1 soft breath to the left of the mast rope. The red feather rests against the wood, barely moving, the color of a wink you can feel even with your eyes on the horizon. When you finally lie down, the canoe sings the same old lullaby, the hiss and slap, the float's punctuation, and you notice that ritual has tuned your body like the steering paddle. The squeaks are gone, the hum is even, the edges are oiled. You fall asleep with the taste of earth on your tongue, a pleasantly disapproving banana at your feet, and the feeling that the road under the road now knows your name. The morning starts with that smug, glassy calm that looks like a postcard and behaves like a puzzle. The swell still walks under you, slow, agreeable, but the wind forgets its lines, and the sail sags like a napping hammock. You shade your eyes with a palm and watch the sea try on its mirror outfit. Calms are polite thieves. They don't take your mast, they take your momentum. The wayfinder smiles the way patient people smile at sticky lids and has the paddles passed forward. You dig in. Not hard, just steady. The canoe rewards you with a bow hiss the size of a whisper, which is better than an argument. Cottony cumulus hover low, the horizon blurs. You recognize the doldrums shrug, where trade winds take a nap and clouds do origami. The crew makes shade with a spare mat. You ration water without making a speech, and you learn the oldest sea joke. The ocean does not care about your schedule, joke 1. A mainstream historical fact slides in with the sweat. Crews across Polynesia planned passages to ride reliable trades and dodged cyclone seasons when they could, especially in the South Pacific, where tropical cyclones frequent the warm months. Even then, voyagers expected calms, and they had calm weather habits you now practice. Paddle in spells, nap in the heat, tighten lashings because idle rope invents mischief, and let the day be longer than your impatience. Someone hands you a sliver of sugar cane. You chew sweetness into your tongue and trick your thirst into being reasonable. The wayfinder reminds you softly that a calm is a teacher. If you can keep morale when the boat moves like honey, you will not panic when it moves like a drum. By afternoon, the sky changes its mind. The horizon to the windward side darkens with the look of wet slate, a smudge sharpening to a line, then a line to a wall. The ocean's surface goes from mirror to brushed steel, scuffed by cat's paws that sprint towards you like excited puppies. You feel the pressure change in your ears, then in the drum of the boom. Silence tightens. The wrong kind, the absence of the right noises, and you remember lesson 1. Silence is a sound you must also read. Short sail, the wayfinder says. No drama, just certainty moving through hands. Everything that looked casual becomes clipped. The crab claw comes down to a storm-sized triangle. The sheet is hitched to a choke you can spill in a heartbeat. You coil loose lines out of the way because tangles multiply in rain. A bailer is set by each hull. The bow is cleared, the ancestor figure under the deck gets a thumb touch, and the bundle of stones by the mast is tucked tighter, their weight a pocket prayer. You check the red feather. It flutters straight now, telling you more than any speech. You slide the heavy steering paddle into your palms. Remember the one that used to outweigh your confidence? Today, you meet it as a friend. Wind arrives without courtesy, trying to borrow everything that isn't lashed. Rain follows, warm as bathwater at first, then chill at the edges. The sea stands up into short, breaking chop, a rehearsal before the main act. The wayfinder's voice stays low. "Quarter the seas," he says. "Keep the bows just off dead-up wind so one hull lifts and settles instead of spearing." You oblige, easing the blade, your knees staying soft so the road under the road can still be felt under the drumbeat. The outrigger float slaps. then learns a gentler punctuation as you find the right angle. Someone streams a drag astern, a simple drogue made from a rolled mat and a net bag of shells to keep the canoe's stern from slewing. Quirky tidbit. Sailors from many oceans, including Pacific crews, have long poured a little oil on water to quiet a breaking bar or slick the teeth off a nasty reef pass. Your crew keeps a leaf bundle with a thumb of coconut oil for exactly that moment near shore. Out here, you save the oil, but you like knowing you have one more civil conversation you can start with angry water. Historians still argue whether pre-contact Polynesian crews systematically used woven mat drogues and oil smoothing, or whether some of those techniques became common later under cross-cultural influence. What your boat knows for sure is that a little drag and a lot of judgment make storms less exciting than they like to be. The rain thickens enough to feel like 1,000 tiny drums on the sail. Lightning mutters far off. The wayfinder steers you away from its loud opinions. The sea climbs. Double-hulled kindness shows itself. The canoe flexes on its lashings, the way a house with good foundations leans into a gust and then laughs. Another mainstream truth tucked under the spray. Lashing, not nailing, lets a Pacific canoe breathe. Rigid joints crack, but woven ones forgive. You taste salt, then rain, then both. The red feather points straight into your cheekbone. You angle a shade more off the wind, spill a breath of power from the small sail, feel the bow ease. A flying fish commits career suicide by leaping aboard, bouncing off your ankle like a silver slapstick. Joke 2. You thank it, apologize, and tuck it in the bailer for later. Shadows move beneath the surface. A dark fin cuts a long, slow arc beyond the outrigger, and someone murmurs a greeting instead of a curse. You've learned that sharks are not just teeth with opinions. In some families, they're aumakua, ancestral guardians who deserve respect and a little conversational dignity. The steersman taps his paddle twice on the hull. Hello, we see you, and keeps the canoe's noise honest. You keep fish scraps out of the water because hospitality has limits. Quirky, but true. Some elders say the right chant makes the wrong shark lose interest. Others say the right posture, calm, upright, not flailing, turns you from confusing seal into wooden thing. You practice looking wooden. You are talented at this. The squall passes like a guest who came to rearrange your furniture and decides it likes you after all. The sky tears open to reveal a silvered edge. The rain softens to a kind hand. Behind the storm, the sea leaves a leftover mess. Crossed chop, swaggering swells, that post-party clatter of waves arguing about whose turn it is to be in charge. You keep the bows dancing just off the wind. The drogue comes in. You tease a little more sail and test the boat's mood. She sighs, then grins, then goes. You mop the deck with a woven mat. Rainwater pools briefly in your footprint and then remembers gravity. The crew's laughter returns like birds after a squall, shy at first, then real. Someone wrings out their hair and produces another emergency banana, which is admired and not eaten because the taboo committee is vigilant even in wet weather. Joke 3. You split the flying fish with a shell, quick work, respectful, and share. It tastes like the first sun after rain. Storms are not the only danger. There are nights when the sea lies so flat you start to wonder if it's listening for you on purpose, and your thoughts get loud. Those are ration nights. Water measured in mouth cups, work measured in short, meaningful bursts. The Wayfinder assigns silly, precise tasks that feel like games and are actually medicine for morale. Identify 5 bird calls in the dark. Tell the most boring true story you know. Relash one seam with your eyes closed. You remember that boredom is not an enemy here. It's a sheath that keeps panic from flashing. When wind returns, it does so with the dignity of a friend who didn't owe you anything and came anyway. And then there is the invisible hazard that has nothing to do with weather or teeth, drifting off course so gradually that you never feel the slide. That's why the road under the road is your oldest ally. In cloud-thick nights, you kneel, cheek to boom, and feel for the main swell's grandmotherly cadence, the cross swell's impatient tap. If the outrigger slaps wrong, you nudge the paddle, rethread the road. The star compass rides in your elbows even when no star can be seen. Your chant keeps time when no clock will bother. Historians still argue whether some legendary long drifts, the stories of canoes blown days or weeks from their intended routes, explain more migrations than deliberate exploration does, or whether those tales are the survivals we happen to hear while many planned voyages arrived exactly where they meant to and left only contented silence behind. From your place on the steering paddle, the debate feels real and also beside the point. Preparation is how you make luck behave. Attention is how you make storms smaller than your boat. The day leans toward evening, bruised purple clouds lifting their hems to let gold through. The sea calms into long, sorted swells, like muscle that remembers how to unclench. You check the lashings again. Storm is a sharp teacher of fray points, and retie one with an extra turn, a little apron of pandanus to guard it. You sip water, not because you're parched, but because you understand now that small sips taken early prevent big thirsts later. The ancestor figure under the deck gets another thumb touch. The red feather dries into its old confidence. You end your watch with a small confession. You were scared in all the quiet ways. The Wayfinder nods. Good, he says, not unkindly. Fear is one of the better bailing tools. A cup of it keeps you from leaving ropes loose and meals untied. You hand over the steering paddle like a ceremonial staff and tuck the bailer back by the scuppers. Over the stern, the storm you dodged is now only a dark hill on the horizon, a place your boat chose not to visit. Later, when sleep finds you, the hull hums its old lullaby and your body, storm tight, then storm loose, sinks into the woven mat with gratitude. Somewhere in your dreams, the ocean is trying on another outfit, but you're ready for it. Drogue, chant, feather, knee, and the steady modesty of crews who take dangers seriously and take themselves just seriously enough. All afternoon, the island behaves like a rumor you can smell. The cloud you've courted for hours keeps its bright hem. Birds commute with union-level commitment. The swell on your starboard cheekbone carries a small, persuading bias. You keep your bearing, 2 finger joints above the forward lashings, and the Wayfinder pretends not to be pleased, which is how you know he is. The air fattens with leaf smell. Somewhere ahead, waves argue with stone. The first sighting is not grand. You see the water go oddly pale in a long stripe, like a road drawn under the surface. Then a darker smudge rises out of the ocean's grammar where the sky should be empty, no taller than a thumb above the horizon at first, then a fingernail, then a knuckle. No one shouts. Someone simply says, "There." You feel it in your knees before you admit it with your mouth. Land. You try to whisper the word and manage something between a croak and a sneeze. Joke 1. The crew pretends the wind made that sound. As you close, details separate from haze. The island grows a shoulder, then a hip, then the long line of a reef like white stitching. Surf blooms and combs along the windward side. A pass shows itself as a darker, breathing mouth where the foam is less eager. You angle to meet it on the right breath. A mainstream historical fact walks calmly aboard. Voyagers used sounding stones on cords, coconut fiber lines with weighted rocks, to read approaching bottoms. By feeling the tug and what the stone collects, they could tell sand from coral, deep from shoal, reef from lagoon. The steersman hands you the line. The first drop returns with coarse, pale sand clinging. Depth is generous. The second carries a breath of coral grit and a tiny shell stuck like a button. You grin, because this is a letter from a place you haven't met yet, and it arrived right on time. Wind and swell play gatekeeper. The pass breathes in, breathes out, the set of the waves telling you when to slip. The Wayfinder waits for 3 even breaths. He wants agreement, not a single invitation, and then nods. Someone passes the leaf bundle of oil. You dip and flick just enough on the leading chop to quiet the small breakers where they threaten to paw at your bow. Quirky tidbit. A thin skin of coconut oil truly does tame a skittish patch of water for a precious few moments. It's hospitality for impatient seas, and a reminder to bring extra leaves. The canoe takes the hint, slides to the sweet spot where the cross swell softens, and you ride in as if escorted by polite giants. The lagoon is a sigh you can sit on. Water turns a color that needs a new name, glass laced with mint maybe, and the reef's roar fades to a patient hush, like applause from a distant room. You ship the small sail, take a few honest paddle strokes, and feel the hull's relief as the chop goes slack. The anchor stone, bored with a neat hole, kisses overboard and bites. In that brief stillness, every smell arrives at once. Warm mud, crushed leaves, sun-hot bark, the mineral breath of fresh water slipping into salt, and somewhere in it, the faint, bread-sweet perfume of pandanus mats baking in someone's future. You sit there and let the island introduce itself by scent before you take a single step. No one jumps ashore. A thin quiet replaces excitement, the weight of tapu settling like a shawl. The wayfinder lowers the little carved ancestor from under the deck and sets it on the platform with a thumbprint of oil. He speaks the names of the winds that brought you and promises the first fish back to Tangaroa, even though your stomach thinks this is a questionable policy. The first to step onto land is chosen with care. Sometimes it's the chief. Sometimes you're told it's the navigator. Sometimes it is the calmest person aboard, which today, mercifully, is not you. Historians still argue whether first-foot rituals were consistent across regions or varied house to house, whether the stepping order marked political claim, sacred obligation, or simply who could be counted on not to trip in front of a new island. Either way, the moment feels both enormous and precise. Your turn comes with soft eyebrows from the aunties and a rope loop to steady you. You slide into knee-deep lagoon, the temperature a human kindness, and pad forward until your toes touch sand that looks like sugar and grips like a handshake. The beach answers your weight with the smallest give, a little exhale, and there you are. One footprint, then two, then a trail leading up to a line where driftwood and sea beans have been arranged by tides with an interior decorator's sense of humor. You do not announce anything. You notice. A crab scribbles rude calligraphy and vanishes into the punctuation. A line of tiny bird prints writes a second, lighter story alongside your own. If you expected trumpets, the island gives you shade instead. Casuarina whispers a soft, needly song. Ironwood drops cones that look like tiny pineapples. Between trunks, a path shaped by pigs you haven't met yet meanders toward the sound of fresh water. You are not alone. The island has tenants you cannot see, and landlords you cannot offend. You carry a gourd in each hand and follow the wayfinder up a shallow, leaf-littered runnel, where water chuckles in places that make your throat remember birthdays. At the stream, you rinse your fingers first, then cup a drink slow and deliberate so your mouth doesn't forget manners and try to swallow the source in one go. Joke 2. The water tastes like rock and relief. You fill the gourds, leave a leaf twist of gratitude, and look down. The mud records more evidence. Hoofprints small enough to be someone's future pig yard. The blunt triangles of sea turtle labor where last night's mother climbed and turned. Even the lace tracks of ghost crabs commuting between shifts. You are entering a neighborhood. You plan your voice accordingly. Back on the beach, the canoe waits. Serene, domestic, as if she always knew she'd park right here. Lines are eased, the sail is bundled. Lashing fray points get a quick sharkskin kiss because good habits don't take holidays. The ancestor figure takes a measured walk onto land. A little stone altar appears. Exactly 3 hand widths from a forked stick, the wayfinder nicks into the sand. He places a chip of coral on the altar, then a shell from the bundle you've carried since the first night. Remember the pocket altar by the bow? A pair of shells reunite with a soft click. Your chest does the same. You scout for a first camp without pretending it's permanent. Shade, breeze, a line of sight to the pass, and ground that drains rather than sulks after rain. The crew fans out, light-footed, with the cautious cheer of people checking a hotel room for friendly ghosts. Someone tests the flats for food with a quick, respectful poke. Sea cucumbers in the eelgrass, trochus tucked under ledges. A few small fish flickering where the river braids into the lagoon. You leave more than you take, because first days are for inventory, not inheritance. A mainstream historical fact, settles down beside the fire you do not yet light. Waves of settlement across remote Oceania unfolded over centuries. Lapita ancestors pushing eastward millennia ago. Later voyages reaching Hawaii, Aotearoa, New Zealand, and Rapa Nui in the last millennium, carrying domesticated plants and animals that stitched tropical gardens across volcanic bones. The sequence is a tapestry, not a line. Historians still argue whether certain archipelagos were found in single bursts by family fleets or through scouting parties who returned with directions and made second, third, and fourth attempts before families committed to gardens and graves. As you look at this beach, beautiful, practical, a little mysterious, you feel how both stories could be true within one generation. Quirky, almost tender. Some crews, you're told, bring hearthstones from home, smooth, dark, cherished, to seed the first oven in a new place, as if carrying the flavor of their grandparents' kitchen across an ocean. Your bundle includes 3 pebbles from the river mouth you left. You set them near the future cooking pit and feel the strange dignity of continuity in your palm. Tomorrow, when you talk crops and pigs and chickens, those pebbles will become a tiny anchor for soup. Names wish to be useful, so you try out a few. Star Pass Beach, Red Feather Bay, Banana Not Welcome Cove. The Banana Taboo Committee is, disappointingly, still active on land. Joke 3. The Wayfinder smiles and says the island already has a name you'll hear by listening. Perhaps in the way wind hunts the gullies? Perhaps in the birds' arguments at dawn. For tonight, you call it here. And that is more than enough. As twilight drifts down, you place the first neat circle of stones to mark a hearth. Not for fire yet, but to begin a habit. You smooth a mat, tie the canoe lightly to a driftwood post for the night, and stand with your toes back in the water that brought you. The reef's deep breath sounds like a sleeping house. The pass you slipped yawns and closes with the tide's punctuation. Behind the palms, the Pleiades begin to prick the sky, right where your sand compass said they would. The road under the road ends here without ending. You make a small promise. To the red feather, to the sharkskin square in your kit, to the ancestor under his pendanus crown, that you will walk softly, build slowly, and keep your attention as carefully as you keep your knives. You lie down to sleep with sand under your shoulder, and a sense that a page has turned without a book ever closing. Nearby, your single footprint is already softening. By morning, crabs and wind and the small cooperative conspiracies of a shore will edit it into a smoother paragraph. That is fine. The island is writing back. By morning, the island has rearranged your job description. You're still a student of swells and stars, but today you learn the other half of voyaging. The half that smells like pandanus, roasted breadfruit, and the mysterious confidence of aunties who have already solved 3 problems you haven't noticed yet. You follow the path where yesterday's pig prints meandered and step into a clearing that hums with purposeful quiet. Mats spread, leaves pile, fibers turn to futures. A woman with sea silver hair, navigator's daughter, navigator's mother, both at once, hands you a strip of pandanus leaf and the unmistakable expression of someone prepared to forgive your first 10 mistakes. Sails don't appear from thin air. They are woven, strip by groomed strip, and much of that work lives in hands like hers. A mainstream historical fact settles into your lap with the leaf. Across many Polynesian societies, women harvested, split, softened, and wove pandanus, lohala, into mats and sail panels, their craft literally catching the wind that carried canoes between worlds. You try to keep your tension even. Your first practice panel curls like a pastry. Joke 1. She smiles, spritzes it with fresh water, and shows you how to stroke the fibers until they remember they're supposed to be friends. Nearby, a younger woman sings while she trims edges with a sharp shell. The song isn't just pretty, it's a mnemonic, a braided line of star names and wind habits tucked into a melody that sits comfortably in a throat. She shifts keys when she changes direction, and your body recognizes the trick from the Wayfinder's chant. Easier to carry a song than a list, she says, and your entire attention claps. Quirky tidbit time. When infants fuss at night, she hums a lullaby that, entirely by coincidence of course, rehearses the order of dawn stars, soothing the baby while sneaking a navigation review into the room. Your future pillow embroidery gets a new line. You help prepare leaves, cut when mature, split along the grain with thumbnails toughened by work, boiled or smoked to soften, dried until they lose their stubbornness, then stored in bundles where the scent of leaf and sun takes up residence in your clothes. Scraping removes spines. Bleaching in sand makes pale panels for sails, darker ones for mats. Dye from mangrove, turmeric, or char inflects a pattern that will read as a quiet geometry when the crab claw rises. You're told to stack finished strips in alternating directions, otherwise they curl, again with the curling, and the sail develops opinions you didn't ask for. Food and seed bundles appear like small altars. A quiet trio unrolls a plated case with the tenderness of librarians. Taro huli wrapped in moist leaf, sweet potato slips, sugarcane sets. A few breadfruit cuttings nestled like green fingers. Gourds with dried seeds for gourds, because containers beget containers. Women tend this living inventory, and you're allowed to carry one basket as if it's a wedding cake. You lower your center of gravity until you're 9 inches tall. Joke 2. The aunties approve. They explain how, on the voyage, root crops ride in damp sandboxes, watered just enough to arrive ready to plant, how fermented breadfruit, mossy in some islands, waits patient in pits or jars for lean times, how chickens calm down when kept in the dark and pigs insist upon sarcasm. Stories travel with the baskets. You hear of a high-born Samoan woman sent across water to seal an alliance. Her canoe greeted with garlands and arguments solved by hospitality. You hear of Tahitian chiefesses who managed fleets and diplomacy with the same composed hands now smoothing pandanus on your knee. You hear the Maori tale of Wairaka on the Mataatua canoe, the moment she declared, "Kia wakatane au iahau," I will act like a man myself, and save the drifting vessel by breaking a tapu that would have stranded them. The wayfinder's daughter nods at that one. Sometimes the person who steps forward wears a skirt because the sea doesn't check costumes. Historians still argue whether women regularly crewed deep ocean voyages as sailors or predominantly traveled on settlement fleets and political missions, with roles changing archipelago to archipelago. The debates swirl like eddies. The work in front of you ties its knots either way. Midday, you watch net making. Women knot fine cord into funnel traps and throw nets, eyes measuring distance the way you measure star height above the lashings. On other days, they'll torch fish at dusk. The flames flare, turning reef shallows into a moving kitchen. Men chase tuna, someone says. Women feed the village every evening. It isn't a competition. It's a logistics plan with sandals. A mainstream truth hums beneath. Domestic work, water, food, fiber, made long voyages survivable and new islands habitable, and much of that expertise was held, taught, and refined by women. The red feather on your mast catches a wink of sun when you return to camp with brimming gourds. A cousin of the wayfinder draws the star wheel in sand and puts a child at each house, girls and boys both, because memory doesn't care who carries it if it's carried well. Again, she says, soft as dusk. They chant the line where Hokulea climbs, the notch where the Pleiades rise, the pivot when a setting star trades for a rising friend. You're allowed to be a star too, one of the sturdy, low ones. And your assignment is, twinkle at appropriate times, you overact. The children giggle. The cat who is not here remains unimpressed, in absentia. You ask, quietly, how authority travels with gender on the water. They answer with examples, not manifestos. A priestess on shore blesses the canoe. A chiefess decides which family gardens seed first. A navigator's daughter keeps the memory of a route no one else recalls until a storm forces the question, and her voice becomes a rope. In some places, the sacred awo or PWO initiation is reserved for men. In others, knowledge moves along less formal lines, grandmother to grandson, aunt to niece, sister to everyone who watches her hands. Historians still argue whether the exclusions we read in certain 20th century accounts reflect older, consistent rules or moments influenced by colonial gaze and missionary prudery. The aunties shrug and point at your curled practice panel with an expression that says, "Talk less, weave more." Domestic genius continues offhandedly saving lives. One woman oils the steering paddle, not for shine, for longevity, then takes the same coconut oil to your cracked knuckles, sealing the burn of rope into something your skin can negotiate. Another cuts a little guard from pandanus to pad the lashing you noticed fraying. She tucks it in and hums as if she's tying a ribbon on a gift. Someone else checks the gourd stoppers, carves new ones from breadfruit wood, and whittles tiny marks so each stopper marries its gourd. Nothing heroic, everything critical. You carry embers the careful way you were taught, banked in a half gourd with charcoal and dry husk, breath coaxing a glow, tucked in an airy bundle so the canoe can transplant fire like a sacred cutting. Quirky, almost ceremonial. One ember is always from the hearth where you said goodbye. When it lights the first oven here, the smoke smells like continuity. You hold the gourd as if it were a small sun with opinions, which in fairness it is. Queens thread back into the clearing as evening cools. A story of Ka'ahumanu in Hawaii rides in, powerful, politically surgical, moving by canoe when it suited her. Another of Salamasina of Samoa, whose chiefly bloodlines braided kingdoms into a calmer mat for a while. Someone mentions Purea of Tahiti greeting foreign ships with a stage-managed magnificence that was both diplomacy and theater. The point isn't celebrity gossip. The point is that decision-making women have always shaped when and why canoes leave, what they carry, and where they come home. Late, you're handed a small duty that feels like a knighthood. Guard the seed baskets while people bathe. The Banana Taboo Committee, indefatigable, stations itself like sentries and eyes your snack bag with moral authority. Joke 3. You accept a wedge of roasted breadfruit instead, and immediately forget every banana you've ever known. The reef exhales. The pass murmurs its punctuation. Children finish their star houses with yawns. You fall asleep on a mat that smells of pandanus and smoky memory, and you realize that the canoe's brain has many lobes. One lobe reads swells, another sings stars. Another, woven, watered, seeded, sung, belongs to women who make sure a boat arrives with a village already sketched inside it. Rope enough, food enough, story enough, softness enough to land without fraying. When the wind returns, it will fill a sail woven by hands you can still feel guiding yours, flattening the arrogance out of your edge, teaching you to catch a breeze and keep a home at the same time. You wake to a choir of opinions disguised as roosters, and the island hands you a new syllabus. Make a garden, build a barn, and persuade everything you brought to consider this sand and lava puzzle home. Breakfast is a council of gourds and nods. The wayfinder sets the ancestor figure on a driftwood table as if to say, yes, the stars mattered, and now so do compost heaps. You start with the shoreline. Coconuts mark the outer ring, salt-tolerant sentries that drink brine without drama, throw shade like generous umbrellas, and volunteer rope, food, bowls, and gossip. Inland, a crescent of breadfruit waits for your hands. You remember last night's 3 river pebbles, home's hearthstones, and tuck them into the first planting pit with a pat that feels disproportionately emotional. Breadfruit likes company, a pit deepened with leaf mold, stacked with rotting husk and fish scraps, sealed with sand. You plant a cutting, whisper something encouraging, and try not to overwater like an anxious houseplant parent. Joke 1. A mainstream historical fact leans on the shovel. Pacific migrations carried a traveling pantry of canoe plants. Taro and yam, breadfruit, banana and plantain, coconut, sugarcane, paper mulberry for bark cloth, pandanus for mats, plus gourds for containers, alongside domesticated animals like pigs, chickens, and, in many regions, dogs. This mobile agriculture kit made empty islands edible. Your crew unrolls it like a recipe. Taro near the stream in future lowy patches, bananas tucked where wind breaks, dryland sweet potatoes on the warm shoulder of slope, paper mulberry where its roots won't sulk. Pandanus returns to the dunes, stitching sand with its roots while promising sails you'll need later. Chickens argue gently from their woven baskets. The baskets look like little pandanus pagodas with doorways just big enough for outraged dignity. You lift one, feather light and surprisingly sturdy. A hen keeps her voice to a soothing cluck. The rooster files complaints in triplicate. You set them in a shaded pen ringed with driftwood and woven fencing. They peck methodically at imaginary problems, and then at real bugs. Quirky tidbit. To calm birds on long voyages, some crews swaddled baskets with soft fiber so the birds felt night even at noon. A quiet chicken lays better and complains less. 2 metrics the whole village appreciates. You scatter a first ration of grated coconut and a handful of tiny shoreline seeds they've clearly been thinking about for weeks. Pigs arrive with the self-esteem of small, delicious bulldozers. The aunties had them slung in netted cradles on deck, snouts looped loosely with coconut leaf to discourage enthusiastic rope tasting, and they step onto sand like nobles disembarking. You stake a roomy pen under ironwood where shade hangs all day, line the fence with vertical stakes and twisted sennit, and discover that pigs solve puzzles faster than committees. The solution is more sennit, a trench under the fence line, and a pile of banana trunks for rooting so they rearrange the sacrificial pile instead of your entire island. The Banana Taboo Committee, unflagging guardians of morale, admits the fruit into pig jurisdiction with a stern look. Joke 2. Taro asks for water and respect. You wade into the shallow swale where yesterday's stream braided, and you carve a neat rectangle with a digging stick, damming one edge with a row of stones set like sleepy teeth. Silt settles, water clears, and you push taro huli, root with a tuft of leaf, into the mud with your thumb. The cool ooze presses back like friendly custard. Loey will multiply, linked patties stepping down the valley, fed by small awai channels you'll line with stones. In time, you'll pound poi until it remembers softness, a food that holds, mild, sustaining, perfect for babies and tired navigators. Your hands are already rehearsing the rhythm. Dryland gardens need different manners. Up on the slope, your crew builds mounds for uala, sweet potatoes, hilled for drainage, mulched with leaves and coral sand to coax moisture and discourage weeds. You lay rock lines windward. They catch drift soil and drip dew back into the ground, a trick this island will teach you 1,000 times. On atolls, you're told, people dig compost pits, babies of the earth, layering husks and leaves until soil becomes sponge. Guano, gathered with equal parts gratitude and nose-breathing, turns pale sand into a garden bold enough to grow taro in baskets, sunk below the salt lens. Today's island gives you more kindness, a volcanic shoulder that smiles at rain. Dogs, where they travel, pad around like quiet cousins. In some archipelagos they'll stay, sleeping by cook fires and, yes, occasionally becoming food in ceremonial contexts you approach with respect and the gentlest voice. Here, they mostly supervise. The workshop cat, who is neither here nor logical, remains the union rep for all creatures who nap on the one tool you need. The first IMU, earth oven, waits for a celebration, so you practice with a smaller hearth to char breadfruit and soften wild greens. Fire rules follow canoe rules. No drama, lots of stones, and a bailer's worth of water within reach. You set aside the first cooked morsel for the sea and the ancestor figure with a tap of the thumb. The taste is simple and persuasive. You pretend you meant to share and succeed at generosity 80% of the time. Joke 3. As the day lengthens, you inventory what grew legs and came with you unintentionally. The little Polynesian rat, stowaway, and sometimes snack. A creature that will complicate gardens and entertain traps. You wedge guards on young tree trunks, collars of smooth wood or shell so small teeth get bored, and promise the chickens better doors. Islands are negotiations. You brought more negotiators than you realized. A second mainstream truth puts on work gloves. Fish ponds, loco IL, turn coasts into pantries. Not today, not this month, but someday you'll set lava stones in a curve to keep young fish in and let adults slip out to make more fish. You'll feed the pond with taro greens and scrubbed algae, and the sea will respond with a sustainable, briny heartbeat. For now, you build a simple weir with stakes and brush near the pass, a first step toward a technology that braids hydrology with patience. You label your new neighbors the way navigators label stars, by behavior. One breadfruit cutting sulks. You shade it with a mat until it forgives the afternoon. The pigs test their pen at exactly the same corner until you brace it with a diagonal. The rooster who crows at lunchtime earns a nickname in a language that translates loosely as Sir Alarm Malfunction. Chickens commit to laying in the one basket you forgot to move. You move it and congratulate yourself on inventing eggs. Water stays your quiet obsession. You sink a gourd into the sand above the tide line where a freshwater lens perches on salt. The mouth fills slowly with a taste like fog and stone. Later, you may dig brick-shaped wells lined with timber or stone to drink from the lens without letting salt crash the party. For now, you carry gourds from the stream and promise your knees they'll be legendary by season's end. Historians still argue whether the sweet potato, uwala in Hawaii, kumara in Aotearoa, reached Polynesia via voyagers who touched South America and returned with cuttings, drift dispersal coupled with selective survival, or later introductions that mingled with older varieties. The story tangles with debates about Polynesian chickens in Chile and the direction of daring. You plant your slips without solving it, happy to let tubers practice diplomacy underground while scholars practice it in journals. Quirky, perfect smallness. Someone strings shells and dry seeds into a wind rattle near the taro patch. It clicks when breeze stirs. A scarecrow that sounds like a polite ant clearing her throat. Someone else tucks crushed charcoal into planting pits to hold nutrients. A black memory of last night's fire teaching tomorrow's breadfruit how to be generous. The red feather from your mast hangs in a new shelter, a bright "you've got this," over a bench where people trim pandanus and swap advice. Evening finds you counting. Not miles now, but sprouts. Animals still inside fences. Eggs. Buckets that did and did not spill. Promises you kept when it was hot. The lagoon glows mint in low light. The pass you slipped through exhales a slow hush. You fall asleep to a different lullaby. Pigs snuffling, chickens muttering, the faint tick of cooling stones, and the soft math of leaves turning sun into lunch. You dreamed yourself across an ocean by stars. You will stay by persuading roots to believe in your voice. Evening lays a warm hand on the new garden and the pen where the pigs are negotiating their contract. And the aunties call you to the mat the way tide calls to the reef. Lantern light, just a husk with a coal and a kind glow, makes faces look like they've stepped out of a bark cloth painting. The wayfinder's daughter pats the spot beside her and begins a story that smells of smoke and pandanus, the kind of story that lengthens the night, while also, neatly, telling you how to get home. You know this one, but not like this. Maui the trickster, skinny as rope, clever as knots, watches his mother's kappa dry too slowly in short racing days. He gets annoyed in that famous way that turns into a plan. He plets snares from coconut fiber. Sennet twisted on patient thighs, the same hiss you hear when you make lashings, and climbs to the rim of the world where the sun staggers by, sweaty and smug. Maui throws, the rope bites, the sun yelps, and suddenly the day obeys the work. The auntie's hands flick in little arcs as if she's casting a line. Every child leans in. Every navigator smiles without moving their lips. There's a mainstream historical fact hiding inside the laughter. Versions of Maui's feats, snaring the sun, fishing up islands, lifting the sky, are widespread across Polynesia and into parts of Melanesia and Micronesia, with local names and local edits. A shared family of tales that traveled with language and canoe. In Hawaii, you'll hear ka makau nui o Maui, the big fishhook of Maui, arched across the sky in the star pattern many of us call Scorpius. In Aotearoa, the hook helps haul up Te Ika a Maui, the North Island. In Tahiti, Maui has cousins with new tricks and old manners. Myths roam as confidently as crews. The story unspools another skein. Maui wants more islands than the map is willing to admit. He borrows his grandmother's jawbone or his uncle's fishhook, depending on the storyteller's mood, ties on a line that might be coconut fiber or might be something more complicated, and he paddles out where the sea begins to forget shore. He drops the hook, which plunges until it finds something that does not feel like any fish. He braces his heels, chants the kind of chant that makes rope stand up and behave, and he hauls. The ocean wrinkles. The canoe groans. Up come islands glistening like enormous, startled parrotfish. The auntie pauses for effect. A child gasps. The pigs, to their credit, acknowledge great literature by staying asleep. You glance up past the red feather tied on the shelter post and find the skyhook itself. The scorpion's curve rises from the horizon like a question mark that already knows the answer. Its season tells you when nights will lengthen or loosen, and its tail marks bearings on your compass houses like a slow, luminous finger. The tail is entertainment, yes, but it's also a filing system. The hook belongs to months and winds. The sun's slowed sprint ties to a calendar that tucks itself into work. You remember how the star houses felt under your feet on the beach, and now you feel them under a story. Quirky tidbit, passed with a suppressed grin. On a few boats in this island group, a miniature hook hangs from a lashing near the mast, a little bone or shell curve in the style of Maui's, rubbed smooth by thumbs. The watch touches it before midnight bearings the way you tap the ancestor figure's brow. Not as a guarantee, just as a courtesy to luck. Yours catches the lantern light and throws a tiny crescent on the mast like a gentle wink. The Banana Taboo Committee, not to be outdone, has decided bananas are fine indoors if fully peeled emotionally. You pretend to understand what that means, joke 1. The Wayfinder's daughter segues, without an extra breath, into the time Maui lifted the sky. She spreads her palms above her head, humor in her wrists. Once, she says, the sky leaned low enough to make everyone crouch like crabs. Maui planted his feet and shoved until there was room for breadfruit to stand, for sails to rise, for thoughts to stretch. You feel the practical kindness of that mythland in the taro terraces chattering in the streambed. In Tonga and Samoa and elsewhere, cousins of this story explain why certain trees bear certain gifts, and why certain winds behave like that neighbor who always returns your bowl cleaner than you loaned it. Historians still argue whether these tales preserve precise sailing instructions in coded metaphor, or whether we moderns squint at cosmology and see charts because we love a tidy office. The auntie lets the debate exist in the pause after a laugh. Then she tells you where to stand to see the hook rise just right in the month you want to plant your sweet potatoes. Both and, not either or. Your mind slips back to the road under the road, the swells you feel in your knees when the stars hide, and finds a cousin in the story's cadence. The rhythm of the chant that snares the sun is the same rhythm you use to count heartbeats against the bow's hiss. The auntie taps the mat. Dun 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 dun. That's the beat you steer by when Kamakau Nui is too high, she says. You practice the tap until you could row to Tahiti without a clock. Joke 2. She nods, pleased that you've turned a tail into a tool without breaking the tail. The ancestor figure sits attentive beside the basket of seed gourds, and someone dares you, gently, to tell a bit you've learned. You clear your throat, glance at the workshop cat who is still not here and still somehow judging you, and you offer a small thread. In one island's version, Maui's canoe mates are told not to look back as land rises. Someone peeks and the hook slips, tearing coastlines into the gapped necklace we know. The moral is obvious. Don't second-guess mid-haul. But the navigational aside is better. Nobody swivels around when the pass is twitchy. Eyes forward, grip steady, wait for 3 agreeing waves. The aunties approve. The pigs agree in principle. A second mainstream footnote curls under the mat. The ancestral homeland, Hawaii, Savaii, Hawaii, names that echo like a chant, lives in story as origin and destination, a place you leave and return to, sometimes as a real archipelago, sometimes as an afterlife across water. The word maps to memory as much as to latitude. Historians still argue whether Hawaii preserves a specific historical homeland in West Polynesia, a general direction toward older islands, or a layered idea braided from migration and metaphysics. The fire pops softly as the question settles into your lap like a friendly gecko. Present, unsolved, delightful. Wind combs the ironwood, and the tail tilts into smaller glimmers. The day Maui taught birds to read the reef's color changes, the afternoon he convinced clouds to hold still so new sailors could find the pass. The moment he tasted a current and declared it soup of the moon. It's comedy with weather notes. You realize how gently these stories smuggle phenomenology into your bones. Read the brightness under clouds. Watch the green in the air above shallow flats. Taste the temperature line between river and sea. The mythic voice tells your senses where to sit, and your senses, being flattered, cooperate. Someone brings out an uli gourd rattle and keeps time while a cousin chants the names of star lines, threading deities through them like beads. Hokupa'a, Hokulea, the Pleiades. Each is introduced to Maui's extended family with a gossip column of attributes you can remember at sea. You wonder aloud whether Maui ever got seasick. Only when his brothers paddled out of rhythm, the auntie says, deadpan, joke 3. She nudges your knee so you'll laugh quietly instead of trying to be respectful in a way that ruins the joke. The story closes the way good roots do, by arriving somewhere both expected and better than expected. Maui is thanked, scolded, teased, and fed. The sun agrees to amble like a decent neighbor. The hook angles down into the horizon with the promise that, season after season, it will rise again to remind you which chapter you're in. You help tamp the ember in the lantern cup and feel the canoe in your body even on land. That flex in the lashings of your shoulders, that soft knee stance you can't unlearn, that habit of keeping 3 signs instead of 1. Later, as the lagoon pretends to be obsidian, and then remembers moonlight, you lie back on your mat and watch Kamakau Nui o Maui clear the trees. The pigs sigh themselves toward sleep. The rooster, confused as ever about time, gives a single comment and thinks better of it. The banana taboo committee dissolves until breakfast. You thread the hook star into your internal compass houses and feel how solid it sits, how forgiving it is at sea when you keep it 2 finger joints above the forward lashings for just this hour of just this month. You won't say tomorrow that a demigod steered you. You'll say the swell did, and your knees did, and your hands did, and the stars did. But you'll also remember the auntie's palms flicking like cast lines, and you'll tighten the little bone charm near the mast out of habit. The road under the road has room for stories. Sometimes a tale is an island you fish up when the horizon looks blank, and sometimes it's a hook that pulls the sky a little closer so you can see what you're doing. Prestige turns out to have a smell. Smoke from new adzes biting wood, coconut oil on fresh lashings, the faint spice of kava, and you catch it the moment another canoe noses into your lagoon. You straighten unconsciously, like a mast when wind remembers its job. The visitor's sail flashes a pattern you don't know yet. Neat diamonds plated in a rhythm that says, "We have aunties who do not mess around." They ease through the pass as if they own the minutes. No one claps. Everyone watches, which is louder. Their chief steps ashore with a grin that has diplomatic immunity. Your wayfinder meets him half a pace from the wet line, and the greeting is a dance made of eyebrows and inventory. You help carry baskets that manage to be both modest and swaggering, fine mats soft as whispers, coils of senet so tight they gleam, pearl shell hooks shaped like crescent moons. A mainstream historical fact stands calmly among the gifts. Across Polynesia, alliances and rivalries braided together through exchange. Samoan fine mats, toga. Tongan kava rituals and marriage ties. Tahitian bark cloth and red feathers. Hawaiian featherwork. Prestige objects that moved authority from one shore to another along with people and stories. You can feel the social barometer rise with every unrolled mat. The kava bowl settles like a small lake between camps, and the ranking is a choreography you can't fake. Who mixes? Who drinks first? Who pretends not to notice who drinks first? The conversation is gentle warfare. "Fine swell from your south," someone murmurs, admiring and competitive. "We rode it," your steersman replies, which is true and also a claim about nerve. You sit still and practice the art of being furniture with ears. Voyages become the coin of the realm. A chief who can send a canoe past the horizon and bring it home fuller than it left. New cultivars, new songs, a marriage that stitches 2 valleys into a quieter mat. Collects the kind of respect that sleeps through storms. The visitors mention an atoll to the north with breadfruit that refuses to sulk in wind. Your chief nods, as if he hasn't already decided someone will go look. "After the next moon," he says mildly, which means soon enough to matter. Historians still argue whether long-range exploration was chiefly directed with abundant resources, or family-driven with chiefs claiming credit after the fact. Your ears tell you both models survive nicely at the same fire. Competition wears a flower behind its ear. When the visitors admire your canoe's easy balance, you pretend to shrug and then angle it so the light loves the hull. They pretend not to notice. Later, they show off a new lash guard trick, a little plated sleeve that keeps the boom from chewing its rope. You copy it immediately, because rivalry is useless if it doesn't improve the boat. You retaliate by letting them accidentally see your oil leaf bundle for slicking a twitchy pass. Accidental generosity is a power move that smells like coconut. Subtle sabotage, however, has its own cookbook. On launch day, a rival might delay your ceremony with unanswerable hospitality. One more bowl of kava, one more song. So you miss the sweet turn of the tide. Or a messenger might arrive at dawn with an ominous but non-specific wind omen that suggests waiting until the cousin of someone's grandmother sneezes twice. Nobody wants to be the person who angered the wind. You learn to smile, thank the omen, and quietly slip away when the swell winks. Quirky tidbit whispered behind a hand. Some crews hide a speed stone under the bow deck, a smooth river pebble from home, fed a drop of kava before each departure. To convince the canoe it is already part river, thus quicker. Your pebble, if you had one, would certainly be innocent of any superstition, Your Honor. The feast becomes a resume. Your new low-i taro shines like green lacquer. You arrange steamed shoots on leaves with the calm vanity of a cat sunning on the only warm stone. Joke 1. The visitors present a pig trussed like a festival, salt rubbed into skin with the precision of aunties who mean to be remembered. Fine mats arrive as armor for egos. Feather garlands appear with that red volcanic glow of status. No one says rank out loud. The textiles do it for them. You pour a little broth on the sand for ancestors and just enough into your own bowl to remain interesting at conversation speed. Proposals float like canoes approaching a pass. A marriage, the chief's niece to your wayfinder's second cousin. A joint voyage, 2 boats, 1 star path, a shared brag. Someone says we could trade stone, and suddenly you can see adze blades from a quarry you've never touched flashing in your workshop like rumors made sharp. Your mind starts an inventory of water gourds and shark skin, and whether your best bailer is in fact hanging from the workshop cat's current nap station. Joke 2. Not all rivalry is foot race. Some is theater. Chiefs rehearse generosity the way you rehearse star houses. Public, confident, memorized. Your chief stands to speak, voice low, and thanks the visitors for bringing wind in their pockets. He slides a new sail panel forward, pandanus bleached to a patient cream, edges bound with senate that promises not to sulk, and offers it as if it is nothing. It is not nothing. The visiting chief smiles, because now his canoe will carry your auntie's work over the horizon, and every clever knot in that panel will tell a small story about who helped whom, when. You drift to the edge of the gathering where boat talk happens in a lower key. A steersman from another island leans against your boom and asks, casually, what height you keep Hokulea above the lashings when the cross swell nags. You answer 1 finger in this season, 2 in that, and he squints like someone measuring a door. Then he confesses he steers by the pitch of the float's slap, a slightly higher note for a slightly higher course. You file it. Rivalry is a market in tricks. Alliances are what happen when the best ones circulate. Of course, spies exist, but they look like aunties. Someone's very helpful relative wanders your work area, complimenting lashings the way a botanist compliments leaves, specific, too specific, and you gently usher her toward the garden where flattery can do less hydrodynamic damage. You remember the Banana Taboo Committee and deploy them as a polite escort. Their moral authority is a weather system. Joke 3. By dusk, all sensitive tools have migrated under mats as if on their own. Not every contest ends in smiles. A canoe can go out and not return, and a chief's face can harden into harvests and head counts. You hear stories of raids and reprisals, of reef passes used for more than polite arrivals. But even there, status often rides logistics. Who can feed a crew for months, repair on the fly, read swells in the dark, and keep morale when wind plays coy? Prestige is an engineering problem with poetry in the margins. The night's last kava touches the sand, and the talk tilts toward itineraries. 2 crews will leave together at moonrise in 3 nights. testing a shared route to that northern atoll with the obliging breadfruit. Your assignment appears as if carved on the mast. Lash guard sleeves, 3 dozen, because apparently your little plait is now fashionable. You set to work with the kind of speed that only shows off if you smile too much. You do not smile too much. Under the murmur, something older moves, the way distance equalizes. Out there, beyond the pass, every chief has to listen to the same road under the road, and every plan kneels to the same swell when clouds erase the sky. The star compass does not accept bribes. It accepts practice. Historians still argue whether eastward expansion across the Pacific was driven more by need, crowding droughts, volcanic tantrums, or by ambition and the delicious human urge to turn rumors into footprints. The firelight answers like a navigator. Yes. And also, sharpen your adze. As people drift to mats, the visiting chief strolls your canoe once more, hands behind his back, politely admiring how the steering paddle has learned your grip. He leaves a gift tucked where only a boat person would think to look. A tiny shell hook lashed near the mast, Maui's wink in miniature. You add a drop of oil to it, just in case luck likes the attention. The workshop cat, still not here, would approve of the clandestine exchange. When the lagoon goes slick with moon and the pass breathes its long punctuation, you lie back on the platform and let the day settle in. Your crew gained a plan, a marriage, 3 new jokes about roosters with bad time management, and a handful of techniques that will quietly shave days off a voyage. Rivalry sharpened your lashings. Alliance multiplied your island. You sleep with fingers still remembering the plait, ears still measuring the float's note, and a calm in your chest that has nothing to prove and everything to prepare. The wind picks up a smell your nose doesn't have a word for yet, tar and unfamiliar rope, and the horizon grows masts where clouds used to be lazy. You've learned to greet arrivals with stillness, but these newcomers wear their own weather. Square sails like stacked clouds, a forest of rigging, and a brass doorbell you can hear from half the lagoon away. You raise your hand the way you would to a neighbor coming to borrow sugar. They raise an entire ship. Your canoe looks over at you as if to say, "I'm nimble, they're tall, let's not switch jobs." You agree, joke 1. They ease through the pass, not badly, for people who don't consult the red feather, and the first exchange is eyes. Then come gifts with gravity, iron that bites wood like a god with a deadline, cloth that drinks color like it's thirsty, beads that make children expand into grins. A mainstream historical fact steps ashore with them. In 1769, James Cook anchored at Tahiti to observe the transit of Venus, and with him sailed Tupaya, a Tahitian priest navigator who later guided the Endeavour through the Society Islands and beyond. His presence braided European charting with Pacific wayfinding in a partnership that deserves more syllables than the history books used to give it. When you see a sheet of paper with islands sketched like freckles across a face you almost recognize, you feel a little homesick and a little seen. Iron changes the rhythm of the adze line. The basalt edge you've learned to coax across wood with patience still sings, but the iron cousin chews fast and low, all business. Your master carver smiles a complicated smile and shows you how to lash an iron blade into the same wooden handle you've held 100 careful nights. Lashing, not nailing, because a canoe still prefers breathing joints over brittle promises. The first time the iron bites, the curl of wood that peels away looks surprised. The workshop cat, who is still not here, would absolutely nap on this new tool if allowed. Trade is choreography and comic timing. Fresh water for nails, breadfruit for cloth, a single rooster for a mirror so polished he mistakes himself for a diplomat. Quirky tidbit. On some early visits, iron nails found their way out of European hulls and into Polynesian fishhooks with alarming speed. Ship's carpenters reportedly slept nervously, and local fishing improved with absurd efficiency. You hold a nail and feel time change in your palm. You also hide your best bailer because you suspect it's about to become fashionable. Not everything they carry is a gift you asked for. Illness stitches through the island in quiet, cruel seams that don't respect tapu or expertise. The aunties take water and songs to doorways, And you learn the names of herbs you wish you did not have to learn. You keep the tone low, and the work steady. Stories help. The ancestor figure under the deck gets a thumbprint and a longer pause. You dip the red feather in oil and set it where it can keep an eye on the doorway. The road under the road cannot carry you away from this, so you carry each other instead. The visitor's maps are arguments disguised as drawings. Neat lines where winds howl, hard edges where the sea gives none. Little loops for reefs you could find with your bare feet in the dark. They ask your wayfinder for names. He gives them song first, then syllables they can trap on paper. He asks them for their winds. They offer compass roses whose letters smell faintly of gunpowder and brass. You both admire each other's tricks and mistrust each other's clocks. Historians still argue whether Tupaya's famous map was a geographic chart or a relational diagram of island networks as remembered by bearings and canoe time. In other words, whether the Europeans misunderstood a brilliant oral atlas by forcing it into their own grid. Your wayfinder taps the paper, then his head, then your chest, and says softly, "Many baskets, one harvest." You recognize the line. You learned it on a boom in a night of small stars. Words cross the beach like shells. Tatau, the click and tap of a bone comb in inked skin, becomes tattoo on sailors who will carry your patterns into far harbors, bragging gently with their forearms. You watch a needle dance an octopus up a wrist and think about memory that refuses to stay in a basket. It insists on walking around where everyone can read it. Cloth takes your dyes politely, but behaves differently in rain than bark cloth. You adapt with the same stubborn curiosity you used on swells. Metal fishhooks flash in green water. A steel knife admits it can't replace shark skin for the final smoothness. You keep both. Sandalwood traders arrive in later seasons, and their urgency has a scent you don't like. Whalers drop anchor and leave grammar behind with their empty casks, teaching the lagoon how to hold a chaos you aren't hiring for. Missionaries build fences out of words and kindness. Sometimes the fences keep storms out. Sometimes they pen laughter in. The Banana Taboo Committee considers filing a joint statement about rum. You redirect them to coconuts, which are better at decisions. Joke 2. In some houses, gods take down their feathered helmets and put on black coats. In others, both hang side by side and nod at each other when they pass. Cook's successors bring chronometers, timepieces that clutch longitude in their tiny teeth, and charts that make your horizon sit still on paper. Ships bring goats that climb your gardens and don't apologize. They bring iron that saves your wrists and guns that don't belong in lullabies. Chiefs find that prestige now includes a ledger, and your careful networks of stone, song, and sail must add columns for beads, cloth, pigs we didn't plan for, and visitors who stay until the wind comes back. You do the arithmetic while still listening for the float's note. Sleep gets crowded. Some knowledge goes quiet on purpose. Chants slip into kitchens where they hide behind recipes. Star names tuck themselves into lullabies where only toddlers and aunties have clearance. The sand compass gets walked at dawn when no one is watching. A steerage of children sways their knees to the road under the road while their elders speak, politely, about school books. Historians still argue whether the thinning of wayfinding in parts of Polynesia was driven mostly by missionary suppression of pagan practice, the brutal math of introduced disease and depopulation, or simple economic gravity. Schooners and steam making long canoe voyages look like a poor use of precious muscle. You suspect a braid of reasons, like every strong rope you know. Yet not everything unravels. Canoes learn to wear a few iron fittings without surrendering their lashings. The oil leaf bundle for slick passes survives under a plank, with 2 new stoppers carved from foreign wood. The sharkskin square for sanding, remember our old friend, still lives in the toolkit, and still leaves your fingertips singing. The ancestor figure travels ashore and back aboard according to tides of caution and courage. The red feather remains red. The road under the road is not impressed by headlines. Quirky, almost tender. A sailor with a sextant tries to explain his instrument to your steersman, who nods gravely, then hands him a feather to hold up until it barely trembles. Your old wind trick. Both men smile like magicians swapping card forces. You try the sextant and immediately measure the height of a very cooperative coconut. Joke 3. He tries the feather and discovers what every beginner learns. Wind does not care if you own brass. You adjust your cooking hearth because a goat has eaten the banana leaves you meant for a steam wrap. You shift your tarot channel to a more discreet bend because too many boots have learned your path to the stream. You place your offering to Tangaroa beside a foreign anchor chain and hope both powers can share a shoreline. At night, you look for Kamakau Nui o Maui, the great fish hook, and it rises, calm as always, which is rude of it and also helpful. You keep it 2 finger joints above the lashings, just like the auntie taught you on that lanterned evening when pigs approved of literature by sleeping. There are bright visits too. A certain European takes your canoe out with the humility of someone who knows what he doesn't know. He listens to the bow hiss and the float's punctuation and leaves with a notebook full of adjectives and a face that looks a little more like a navigator. Another leaves behind a small library, and your children read about far winters they can't imagine and bring back new jokes about snow that no one understands but everyone enjoys. In time, charts cover your archipelago with names that do and do not belong to your grandmother's mouths, and schooners thread passes your grandfathers taught them to trust. Some star chants go hoarse, some canoes rot in grass. But the knowledge does not vanish. It goes to the same pantry where you keep leftover lashing, coiled and patient, smelling faintly of coconut and rain. When the lagoon is still and the night has bored the loud voices back into sleeping, you can hear someone on the beach dragging a palm frond in a circle, marking the compass houses in sand that will forget them by noon and remember them in you. You tidy the workshop. Yes, the cat would have chosen this moment to nap on your new iron adze, and set your little deck circle of shells and ribs where it can catch morning. The pass breathes. The reef applauds. The ancestor's stone is warm under your thumb. You look at the tall ships anchored beyond the bar, and then at your canoe, whose lashings shine like quiet handwriting. You are living in a chapter with new fonts. The sentence you steer, though, is still in your own voice. You stand on a pier slick with dawn, and a double-hulled canoe noses up like a memory that learned to use email. The lashings hum the same wooden vowel you've carried in your ribs since that first night in the forest. But the crew's shirts say things like Voyaging Society and Crew Training, and someone is labeling dry bags with a marker that smells like the future. The mast gets a familiar thumb of oil. The little ancestor figure rides under the deck. A red feather flutters at the lashing like a small, stubborn sunrise. The road under the road is exactly where you left it. Training looks different and exactly the same. You walk the star compass chalked across a parking lot behind a canoe shed. 32 houses drawn between faded basketball lines. Because practice happens wherever knees are available. Your teacher points with her chin. Kids tiptoe from house to house chanting names, swapping in right 3 fingers above the boom for a sky that isn't up yet. A quirky tidbit they tell you with a grin. When weather traps everyone ashore for weeks, crews keep their bearings by office navigation. They sit under the fluorescent lights, close their eyes, and steer by the pitch of the air conditioner while someone dims the room and calls out rising stars. It's ridiculous. It works. You try not to clap. Joke 1. A mainstream historical fact steps aboard like an old friend wearing a new shirt. In 1976, the Hawaiian voyaging canoe Hokulea made landfall at Tahiti, navigated without instruments by Maupiailug of Satawal, proving in salt and wind what elders had been saying all along, that wayfinding is a living, rigorous science of the senses. 4 years later, Nainoa Thompson would guide Hokulea back, refining a star compass in a modern idiom and building a teaching lineage. The PWO initiation, a sacred investiture of master navigators, returned to Hawaiian voyagers in 2007 when Mao performed the rites for a new generation. You weren't on those decks, but the story steps into your hands when you tie a lashing and hum a bearing. The revival spreads like breadfruit roots finding water. Waka hurua in Aotearoa, Te Aurere, Nga Hiraka Mai Tauhiti, carve quiet wakes through Tasman Gray. Tahiti's Fa'afete and the Okeanos fleet in Micronesia lace atolls into a family again. Haikianalia, Hokulea's sister, carries solar panels and a disciplined respect for the wind. One canoe, Hawaii Loa, is built from Alaskan spruce gifted by Tlingit and Haida communities, when the island's big koa trees proved scarce. A kindness that smells of pitch and reciprocity. You run your hand along a hull that carries other forests in its backbone and feel the world leaning toward repair. Historians still argue whether sneaks back into the conversation because that's what it does. Whether modern voyages fully match ancient practice or necessarily hybridize, safety escorts on the horizon, VHF radios sleeping in a dry bag, while the core skill lives where it always has, behind the eyes and under the skin. You hold both truths without drama. The bow hiss measures heartbeats just fine whether or not a safety boat is squinting 3 miles astern. Your job remains the boring heroics. Keep the star at the right height, keep the outrigger light, keep the crew kind. You visit a school where kids learn cloud reading by drawing island hats in blue pencil, and you think of that first bright-bottomed cumulus you chased across open water. You watch a teenager smooth a snag on a boom with a square of sandpaper, then trade it for a true sharkskin patch. Remember that old friend? And the smile that crosses her face when her fingertips buzz is the same smile you wore. The Banana Taboo Committee has rebranded as Galley Logistics, and while bananas are officially permitted on training days, everyone pretends this is not controversial. Joke 2. A workshop cat, improbably urban, occupies the only warm corner of the canoe shed and sits squarely on the coil of line you need immediately, proving that felines are a pan-Pacific constant. Launch day smells like coconut and sunscreen, smoke and speeches. A conch sounds, one open vowel stepping off the pier, and the canoe slides into water that has been waiting patiently since chapters 1 through 14. The wayfinder for this leg is a woman in her 30s with a voice you'd trust at a cliff edge. She places a shell circle on deck, touches the ancestor figure, and looks at you until your knees remember themselves. The sail lifts like a thought you've been having all your life. Out beyond the harbor, the swell becomes that grandmotherly metronome you love. You can feel the road under the road again. Less like deja vu, more like coming home from the store with bread. At night, the star wheel gives you old friends in a new accent. Hokupa'a sits, Hokulea climbs, Kamakau nui o Maui, the fishhook, hauls the horizon up in its own season. You raise your fingertips and set a star 2 joints above the boom, and the float answers with the same soft punctuation it gave your grandparents. The watch touches a small bone charm lashed near the mast because some habits deserve continuity. You still trade 3 agreeing signs before you aim for a pass. A bright cloud base, bird lanes sharpening, the swell's little refraction nod, and you still offer the first fish back to Tangaroa because gratitude is a navigation aid. On long voyages, you rotate through watches until your sleep learns to purr like line on a fair lead. You practice a talk, Ghost Island stages sliding beneath your stable canoe, even as GPS pings mutely in an escort boat you can't see and won't ask about. You file weather reports with a pencil because pencils never lose battery. You pour a dab of coconut oil on a choppy bar when a reef mouth acts like it didn't get the memo, and you feel the water slick for a widening breath. You teach a kid to hold a feather until it barely quivers and watch power bloom in her posture. Debate lives gently on deck, too. Historians still argue whether indigenous navigation ever truly disappeared in some archipelagos or persisted quietly in short-haul fishing, sacred chant, and muscle memory, while outsiders wrote obituaries. The elders on your canoe answer with shrugging love. Knowledge hides when shouted at and steps forward when sung to. You prefer songs anyway. Outreach days veer toward comedy. You dock beside cruise ships that look like apartment buildings doing cosplay, and you give tours to people who ask if you sleep standing up and whether the stars really work. You point at a chalk circle, a shell, a feather, and your knees, and you say, "Yes, the stars really work." So does paying attention. A kid leaves the pier walking in soft arcs, knees loose, reading the wind with a grin. Somewhere, a banana peels emotionally. Joke 3. And then, the big arc, you join a leg of a worldwide voyage, the kind Hokulea and sister canoes have made, circling the planet to offer a simple statement in the many languages of ports. Our ancestors were scientists and artists. Our islands are classrooms. Our future needs the humility of sails. You arrive in harbors where winter has tasted the water. You depart from places where the sun naps in the wrong part of the sky. You share a recipe for sharkskin smooth attention and receive a recipe for soup. The map is not the point, the wake is. You return, as all good stories do. The pass you love breathes its punctuation, and the lagoon goes mint with welcome. People wade out carrying lei that smell like yellow blossom and patient aunties. The ancestor figure rides ashore, red feather unfaded, shark skin square tucked in the toolkit like a smiling secret. You step onto sand and look at the chalk circle still faint in the parking lot and at the stars already sneaking into late afternoon. The workshop cat continues to nap on the one coil of line you need. Some constants are gifts. When you finally lie down, the canoe's song is inside you, unspooling and respooling with your breath. Revival wasn't a miracle. It was a decision, repeated until it became boring enough to be unstoppable. You trudge, you hum, you bail, you count, you laugh, you choose 3 agreeing signs instead of 1 loud one, and in doing so, you rethread the old road through the new world. The horizon does not change. Your posture does. That is enough. And now, as the wake settles into long, unshowy ripples, let's untie the muscles in your jaw and ease everything down. Picture that beach you've been visiting, the one with the mint lagoon and the pass that breathes like a sleeping house. The canoe is pulled up just far enough that the wash whispers around its toes, and the red feather hangs still, a quiet ember in the last light. You sit on the sand where it's cool and a little damp, and you feel the day's small salt crystals turning back into ocean, one slow sparkle at a time. The star wheel is patient tonight. It rises without hurry, each bright friend taking its place the way lanterns bloom along a gentle path. You don't need to remember the names now. You don't need to hold heights or count heartbeats. Let the sky carry you for once. The road under the road is folding itself into the bigger hush, and your knees, faithful gatekeepers, can rest. That soft background hum, the one we invited at the very beginning, is here again. Bow hiss remembered, palm leaves agreeing with the wind, the mild rattle of a seed necklace hanging near the taro patch. Somewhere in the dark, the banana taboo committee has finally gone to bed, and even the workshop cat has given up on supervising, curled into a comma that promises more sentence later. The ancestor figure under the deck is just a silhouette now, familiar and kind. If a tiny bone hook near the mast catches moonlight, it's only to say, quietly, that tomorrow will rise in its season. You have nothing to prove to it. It has nothing to demand of you. Breathe in, salt, leaf, the faint sweetness of pandanus, and breathe out whatever creased the day. Imagine the chalk circle on the ground behind your eyes, sand smooth and empty of tasks, waiting for stars to come and go while you do absolutely nothing. Let the tide answer its own questions. Let the canoe keep its own gentle balance. All the wayfinding you need for the next few hours is the easy line toward sleep, and you're already on it, drifting, steady as a feather that has found the quiet part of the wind.